subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Too presumptuous. Urza behind him slammed a punch against the wall beside him. The huge force directly shattered the wall. Mira Jane, who was startled again, jumped. You guys all stop me. The fairy tale disciplinary committee is officially launched. Gray, where are you dangling without your clothes on? Waka, your ashes are all over the floor. Clean up FCK. Lidesu, what are you doing as a painter and fighting with them? Kana, are you stealing alcohol? And Macau, Mira Jane quietly approached Luo Xingchen's ear. Is this guy always like this? You'll get used to it later. Luo Xingchen didn't explain. After a series of roll calls, Urza finally sighed. He waved his hand. Forget it, let's go here today. Everyone groaned inwardly, but didn't dare to say anything. But Urza nodded with satisfaction when he saw the result of his persuasion. Let's go. I'll take you to see the president. See, there's no good show to watch. Luo Xingchen led Mira Jane towards the bar. Chapter 54, The Best Guild. Hey, how's the mission going? Watching Luo Xingchen's arrival, Makarov, who was sitting above the bar, opened his eyes that were slightly blurred because he was slightly drunk. Almost a lot of the time. Makarov keeps it that way. Therefore, Luo Xingchen has long been surprised. The mission should be considered a failure. Luo Xingchen pulled out the chair in front of him, sitting down, said nonchalantly, should? Fail. He looked at Luo Xingchen in front of him. Makarov was a little puzzled. Not only him, but even everyone in the guild at this moment looked at each other in dismay. Obviously a little restless. Who is Luo Xingchen? That was a monster that even guildarts marveled at. Plus a recognized monster, Urza. Combining 2 and 2, there will be a situation of mission failure? What's going on? Makarov asked aloud, after taking a sip of water to moisten his throat. Luo Xingchen put down the cup and explained, it's like this. After listening to Luo Xingchen's words, Makarov's gaze turned to Mira Jane among the three behind Luo Xingchen. The old face raised a kind smile and said softly, can you show me your arm? Mira Jane hesitated, but only after seeing Luo Xingchen watching from the side, he mustered up his courage. He lifted the tightly wrapped cloak. He stretched out the demon's arm. Looking at the arm, Makarov put the wine glass in his hand aside. After a moment of silence, then he spoke slowly. Xingchen is right. It's just that the use of magic is not proficient. If you want to change back, you can only strengthen your magic proficiency. As for what to do, if you don't suggest it, I can teach you. Really? Makarov's voice fell. Mira Jane hadn't even spoken yet. Lisena on the side immediately spoke up. She came to Makarov and bowed deeply. Thank you so much for helping my sister, Grandpa. Ha, little sister, don't be so polite. Looking at the well-behaved Lisena, Makarov's old wrinkled face just laughed out loud. President, you restrain yourself. It will scare people. Luo Xingchen on the side reminded. Cough, cough. Makarov glanced at Luo Xingchen. It's just that you always tear down my stage. Luo Xingchen shrugged, non-committal. Then Makarov looked at Mira Jane again. How is it? Has it been decided? His cry. Mira Jane, who was a little stunned because of her joy, woke up. Looking at Makarov, Mira Jane nodded heavily. Thank you. Thank you. Then he turned his head again, looked at Luo Xingchen, and bowed slightly. And Xingchen, thank you very much. Luo Xingchen waved his hand indifferently and said with a smile, well, let's work hard. I will. Mira Jane smiled, blushing. Makarov on the side kept shaking his head. This kid. His eyes turned to the side, not knowing when Urza, who was already seated and enjoying strawberry cake. Mira Jane, whose cheeks were reddened in front of her eyes, squinted. It's really good. Finally, he let out an unexplained sigh. Not just Makarov. At this time, even most people in the guild discover the problem. Ah, did you find it? That newcomer. His eyes are always on Xingchen. Cut, what do you say? I found out when they came in just now. The girl in the cloak has always followed the stars, never leaving for a moment. Have a leg. The constant whispers makes Urza frown. looking towards the bar. She didn't know what to do with the figure smiling at Luo Xingchen. An uneasy feeling surged inside. Even the fork that was going to dig the cake was stuck on the cake. The enormous force instantly ripped the cake-loaded plate apart. Immediately, Gray and Kana on the side broke into a cold sweat. "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but please calm down." "I'm calm," Urza responded through gritted teeth. "Children, introduce yourself. This will be your home from now on." Makarov looked at the three children in front of him and said, "My name is Mira Jane Strauss." Mira Jane looked away from Luo Xingchen. He took a deep breath and said to the crowd, "Hello, everyone. My name is Lisana Strauss. Please give me more advice in the future." Lisana smiled and bowed slightly to the crowd. My name is Elfman Strauss. Please give me some advice." Elfman grabbed the bottom edge of his little blue suit with both hands. A hesitant introduction. "Very good." Makarov raised his glass. "Stand up from a bar. Hold it high above your head and say aloud, 'Kids, stop for me. Now, let's have a party to welcome Mira Jane, Lisana, and Elfman.'" "Oh!" Everyone stood up together and raised the wine glasses in their hands. Cheers in unison. "Welcome to Fairy Tale." Look at the crowd that suddenly became lively. The three Mira Jane were a little overwhelmed. They had never seen such a scene before. There have never been so many people. They will accept the three of them from the bottom of their hearts. Fairy Tale, it looks like a really great guild. Chapter 55 S-Class Mage Upgrade Exam. The banquet is going on. Most of the people in the guild started to get together. Drink, chat, play. Still looking happy. And as the protagonist of this banquet, Mira Jane, Lisana, Elfman III, it was surrounded by a group of children of the same age. "Mira Jane, are you strong? Do you want to fight?" Natsu, who had woken up from a coma, shouted. Gray on the side was speechless. "By the way, I remember you just recovered, right? Do you have no pain nerves?" "Gray clothes," Kana reminded in a low voice. "I'll win," Gray exclaimed. Surrounded by the enthusiasm of the crowd, the three Mira Jane unknowingly. It has already begun to integrate into this guild. "Hello, my name is Levy MacGarden. It's also a new member who just joined not long ago. Please give me more advice in the future." At this moment, the little girl with blue hair also came over. Luo Xingchen also knows about Levy, a very quiet little girl who joined some time ago. Joining with Levy were two children. One was named Jet and the other was named Droy. It is said that they are playmates who have been together since childhood. In the deepest image of Luo Xingchen, it is Levy's hobby that is extremely fond of reading books. This made Makarov happy for a while. After all, most people in the entire guild are basically a bunch of idiots who only rely on their muscles. Therefore, Makarov is well aware that it is not easy to appear an intellectual. Also, Levy and Lisana are about the same age. Naturally, the two little girls got together easily. For the first time meeting so many peers. Even a shy Elfman let go. The banquet also gradually passed halfway through the laughter and laughter of the crowd. At this moment, Mira Jane sneaked up to Kana's side. He asked, "Kana, I heard that you joined the guild very early, right?" Kana nodded and looked at Mira Jane suspiciously. "What's wrong?" This." Mira Jane seemed a little bit inexplicable. He bit his lip tangled. He glanced at Luo Xingchen, who was sitting at the bar, took a deep breath, and said, "I want to ask, do Urza and Xingchen have a good relationship?" Urza and the stars. Kana's eyes kept going back and forth between the two of them, although it is strange why Mira Jane would ask such a question. But she still didn't think much about it, and continued. "I remember that Xingchen has been teaming up with Urza to carry out missions since joining the guild. In terms of relationship, it should be the best." "Best?" Mira Jane murmured softly. His eyes turned to Urza, not far away. Coincidentally, Urza is also looking at this at the moment. For a while, the eyes of the two who were destined to face each other looked at each other. Suddenly, the surrounding air seemed to have dropped a notch. Gray shuddered. "Strange. Did the stars cast their magic again?" Gray murmured, "Who knows, but I'll be able to defeat the stars one day." Natsu raised his fist, fighting intent in his eyes. "Speaking of which, can you bring any topic into the fight?" Kana muttered silently. It has been a month since Mira Jane and others joined the guild. With the addition of the three, let the guild live a lot again. Of course, it refers to the liveliness of fights. Especially Mira Jane, her talent is really worthy of the word genius. After learning magic with Makarov for a while, then mastered the receiving magic skillfully, strength directly ushered in a big leap. Steady suppression of Natsu and Gray and others. Even with Urza on par. But I don't know if it's because of the arm problem that has been completely solved. Mira Jane, who originally looked a little inferior to Luo Xingchen, transformed and became more confident. No, I should be so confident. The cloak that I never dare to take off, haven't seen it since. Instead, it is a black suspender shorts with black hot pants and black boots. The neck is worn with a leather choker, commonly known as a neck collar ornament. Her silver-white hair was tied into a high ponytail with a purple skull bow. He also wears a bracelet on his wrist. The whole person revealed an extreme youthful rebellious taste. Well, more rebellious than Laxus. And don't know what happened. Mira Jane and Urza both seem to dislike each other. Mira Jane often acts against Urza, and Urza also saw Mira Jane very upset. According to the words of everyone in the guild, that is another pair of Natsu and Gray in the guild. His thoughts returned. Luo Xingchen had arrived at the gate of the guild. The closed door seemed to be unable to isolate the noise coming from the door. But the noisy content is very different from a usual. There's only one reason. S-Class Mage Upgrade Exam. Competitors will be announced today. Therefore, Luo Xingchen also came to the gate of the guild early. Maybe a little nervous, but more still calm. After all, there are only a few who meet the conditions in this assessment guild. Basically, you can already know who it is. This time, it's just for sure. He reached out and pushed open the door of the guild. Mixed with the excitement of the discussion sounded oncoming at the first time. Almost everyone in Fairy Tale who is still in Magnolia has gathered here. Their eyes were all locked on the high platform that was covered by the curtain at the front. Seems to be waiting for something. Smile slightly. Luo Xingchen took a step towards the guild. Chapter 56. The challenge of deciding strength some time ago. Everyone in the guild did their best to complete the task. Although everyone knows it, only Luo Xingchen and Laxus have a high probability of having that strength in the guild. However, the people participating in the assessment are not necessarily the only two. In case his efforts during this period of time were seen in his eyes, it is not impossible to become the third person by then. After all, there are still dreams. What if it does happen that day? Everyone in the guild gathered together in twos and threes and kept discussing. S-rank magician. I'm already burning. Natsu clenched his fists, inexplicably excited. Why are you, a person who can only perform D-level tasks, so excited? Gray didn't hesitate to hit his dead opponent. Huh? What are you talking about, drooping eyes? Natsu was immediately upset. The drum boss's eyes stared at Gray. Retorted, aren't you the same? Gray curled his lips in disdain and replied, I'm different from you. I'm someone who has performed A-level missions. That's just luck. Xingchen took you there, and you didn't seem to be doing anything for that mission, so come back. Natsu put his arms on his chest, telling the news that I found in Kana. That's better than you too. How are you better than me? Everywhere. Oh, Kana on the side ignored the exchange between the two. He put his hands on his chest and made a prayer. I'm so nervous. S-Class Mage? I must choose. Mira Jane clenched her hands. Appears confident. That, Sister Mila, I think it seems a little impossible. Lisana reminded her sister in a low voice. After all, we've only been here for a month. Sister Mila, you haven't completed any tasks yet. Hear Lisana's words. Mira Jane suddenly said, That's true then, glancing at Urza, who was on the side. Then I curse Urza not to be chosen either. Coincidentally, this sentence was completely heard by Urza. Suddenly, Urza's face darkened. Shun said, I heard it right just now. You must have said something bad, bad girl. Bad? Who are you talking about? You and this tough woman. Mira Jane showed no sign of weakness. I'm talking about you, the woman with the belly button exposed. Girl in armor. Skinny girl. Fat pig. Lisan on the side helped her forehead helplessly and sighed. Why did it become like this? After entering the guild, Luo Xingchen saw the blonde-haired boy in the corner at a glance. Not discussed with others. He just leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. It seemed a little out of place. Shaking his head, for Lax's character, Luo Xingchen had nothing to do. This guy, if it doesn't prove that you are better than him, he will never listen to any of your words. Then Luo Xingchen took his eyes back. But Laxus on the other side also seemed to notice Luo Xingchen's sight. He opened his eyes and pondered for a while. He took a step and walked towards Luo Xingchen. Laxus? Is there something wrong? Seeing Laxus coming, Luo Xingchen was a little surprised. After all, it was the first time that Laxus took the initiative to find someone. This time the S-level mage's upgrade assessment. Let's fight. Not too many words, Laxus directly issued the gauntlet to Luo Xingchen. It seems that you have been looking forward to it for a long time. Aren't you afraid that I will not be selected? Luo Xingchen responded, but Laxus shook his head and said, You and I both understand that the two of us are bound to be selected. By the same token, if you can't even be selected for the S-rank wizard upgrade assessment, I won't come to you. After a pause, he looked directly at Luo Xingchen. His eyes were full of seriousness. I will prove that I am better than you. Look at Laxus at the moment. Luo Xingchen was also silent for a moment, then nodded. Okay, I promise. Seeing this, Laxus smiled slightly. Very good, then see you in the assessment. After letting go of these words, Laxus turned around directly, left here without any hesitation. On the other side, Gray and Natsu were both on their heads. Sparks flickered in his eyes. His mouth was still talking trash. And Urza, who was supposed to stop the two at ordinary times, was there. I'm not in the mood to take care of Natsu and Gray anymore. At this moment, she was desperately pulling Mira Jane's cheeks with her hands. And his crimson hair was also firmly grasped by Mira Jane. The two fell into a stalemate like this. No one would let go first. Fortunately, Makarov's voice stopped the two in time. Be quiet, brats. The curtain on the stage was slowly opened, and two voices, one high and one short, appeared in front of everyone. One is the third-generation president of Fairy Tail, Makarov. One is Fairy Tail's current strongest S-class. It is also the only S-rank mage, Guildarts, who came back in a hurry a few days ago. He glanced at the audience and waited until everyone was quiet. Makarov coughed lightly and said, I won't go into too much detail. Let's get straight to the point. This year, there are only two people who are eligible to participate in the S-rank mage assessment. Their strength, mind, and belief are all in the eyes of the old man. Therefore, they have obtained the qualifications to ascend the S-level ladder. First, it's Laxus Dreyer. Makarov announced the first name. He looked at his grandson. He didn't notice any mood swings in him. Without hesitation, Makarov announced the second name again. And then Luo Xingchen. The above are the candidates for this S-rank mage. Under the stage, Luo Xingchen, who heard his name, turned to look in the direction of Laxus. Coincidentally, Laxus was also watching at this moment. The eyes of the two people looked at each other across the distance of dozens of seats and benches. It was like a silent declaration before a battle. Chapter 57. Young people who climbed the peak. Two names for the fairy tale crowd. Not much of a surprise. After all, these two have always been on everyone's guest list. However, it is similar to Mikao, Wakaba, and the like. All he could do was let out a long sigh. Sure enough, even in middle age, I can't even set foot in the S-class field. But soon they cheered up again. After all, it's been so many years, it's time to get used to it. S-rank mages, there must be my name next year. Natsu clenched his fists, confident. I don't know where your confidence comes from. Gray pouted. What did you say? The two who had just stopped arguing seemed to have signs of continuing. Urza on the side was a little lost, but is also acceptable. After all, Urza knows his strengths. Not to mention Luo Xingchen. Even Laxus is still some distance away. As for Mira Jane, expressed a strong laugh at what Urza didn't pick. Then he turned his attention to Luo Xingchen in the crowd. He murmured, if it's Xingchen, it shouldn't be a problem, right? The location of this S-level assessment is in the West Wilderness Forest. Makarov said aloud after looking around. Immediately, everyone was stunned for a moment and immediately started a discussion. You must know that the West Wilderness Forest is almost a restricted area by default, just because it's not an area occupied by humans, but the paradise of monsters. Among them, monsters with S-rank strength often haunt. Therefore, this is the location of many S-rank crusade missions. That kind of place. Even in ordinary guilds S-rank, mages enter a terrifying forest that is deadly dangerous. President, is it really okay to set the assessment location in that kind of place? Macau asked worriedly. Makarov on the high platform shook his head firmly. As an S-rank wizard of fairy tale, if you can't even slay S-rank monsters, what are you talking about, S-rank? This is the foundation of the basics. Makarov's voice was full of determination and beyond doubt. But that kind of place doesn't necessarily have to have only one S-rank monster. Others are worried. Don't underestimate the S-rank candidates in the guild. Gildarts, who had been silent, spoke up. His eyes swept across Luo Xingchen and Laxus under the stage. The originally indifferent face was filled with a long-lost seriousness. They are young people who have the potential to hit the peak of the magic way. Listening to Gildart's words, the scene fell into silence. That's right. Even if it is the West Wilderness Forest, it's just a small bump on the S-rank road for these boys. Makarov said in a deep voice. In the road ahead, there will be even greater difficulties waiting for them to overcome. There are towering peaks waiting for them to climb. These young people can't be afraid to move forward because of the difficulties ahead. And this isn't just for S-rank mages. Having said that, he looked at all the members of Fairy Tale. There seemed to be pride in the old eyes. The same applies to you. I hope you can overcome all obstacles, move forward bravely, and climb the peak. Makarov's right arm is raised, index finger and thumb outstretched. The other three fingers clenched tightly, showing a gesture of 1 to 7. The tone is very high. This is the Wizard of Fairy Tale. Oh ho 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 ho. Countless people responded loudly to Makarov. Some of them crossed their shoulders, some raised their glasses, some even stood on the table. Despite the uneven lineup, they all raised their arms high. Compare the same gesture. That's right, just because we are fairy tale wizards. I'm on fire. Natsu stood on the table. Yang Tian spewed flames. Below, Urza and Mira Jane, who were pinching together just now, raised their right hands together. Look at each other and smile. But he turned his head away immediately. Laxus looked at this scene. His eyes seemed to fluctuate a little. This gesture seems to be invented by myself. This familiar gesture seemed to bring him back to the year of the Harvest Festival, when I was riding on Grandpa's shoulders. Aren't you together? Luo Xingchen's voice interrupted his memory. Cut naive. After explaining some time in a week, Makarov turned and left. Yo, boy, this time I'm your examiner. Gildart smiled and patted Luo Xingchen on the shoulder. You're not going to avenge your personal revenge, right? Luo Xingchen's eyes were scrutinized. Is this the image I am in your heart? Gildarts clutches his chest in pain. You've always been unreliable. Luo Xingchen was expressionless. Stinky brat. It's still the same duplicity. Gildarts laughed and rubbed Luo Xingchen's short black hair. In the corner, the girl silently watched the scene in front of her. S-class. The girl muttered softly, lowered her head, and her eyes were a little dazed. Seems to be thinking about something. I also really want to be stroked by you like this. Maybe only to become S-rank. Only then can we draw this distance that is like a world apart. I'll keep going until I get to that stage. Chapter 58, The Assessment Begins, surrounded Luo Xingchen a week. Passed by Luo Xingchen and Laxus in the tight preparations. Outskirts of the West Wilderness Forest. Luo Xingchen, Laxus, and Makarov appeared here. See the peak in the middle of the forest. Makarov was the first to speak, pointing to the towering peaks ahead. Because I knew in advance that the assessment location was in the West Wilderness Forest. Therefore, Luo Xingchen also checked the topography of this place in advance. The entire West Wilderness Forest covers nearly 100 kilometers around. The overall shape is round in the very center of the forest. There is a peak of about 5,000 meters above sea level. unlike the regular mountain, is a triangular shape. The overall shape of this peak is very close to a cylinder. It is surrounded by steep cliffs. In other words, if you want to climb, the difficulty increases geometrically. Remember what I said yesterday, since it's a fairy tale S-class wizard, then there must be a spirit for climbing, so. A smile spread across Makarov's aged face. Said, your first level is to start from the 2 starting points that we have planned. Travel through this dangerous forest, and finally climb to the top of the central mountain. It is worth noting that the time is only 24 hours, which is a day and a night. Also, the roads corresponding to the 2 starting points are not the same length. Makarov put his hands behind his back and stared at the 2. That is to say, luck, strength, and judgment on crisis and current situation, etc. That's what needs to be assessed in the first game. Wait a minute, that means... Laxus interrupted Makarov. He frowned slightly, then said, it's almost impossible for me and Xingchen to meet in this game, right? Originally, Laxus was thinking that in this duel, fighting with Luo Xingchen, but such a rule. Even if you can't touch it, what kind of battle are you talking about? Makarov seems to be aware of his grandson's thoughts, shaking his head slightly. If you both break through the first level, you will meet at the top. But having said this, he paused. The smile on his face is so weird. At that time, it's up to you whether you choose to fight or something. Makarov said no more. He stretched out his hand to signal the 2 to go to the starting point. Then let's start choosing. Laxus nodded, turning to look at Luo Xingchen. I'll be waiting for you at the summit. There are not too many words. In his opinion, Luo Xingchen is 100% capable of reaching the top. If not, that would prove to him that Laxus was seeing the wrong person. With that said, he took the lead in walking towards the starting point closest to him. Indifferent smile. Luo Xingchen followed closely and walked towards the starting point on the other side. The starting point is marked by Makarov with the red fairy tale coat of arms, so it's easy to find. Looking straight ahead along the starting point, it is a road that is not spacious. After a short road, there's a dense forest ahead. A simple warning sign stood beside it. Forbidden area in front. Please detour. Ignore this sign. Luo Xingchen walked towards the forest without hesitation. The West Wilderness Forest is known as a forbidden area for human beings and a paradise for monsters. The reason is that there are countless monsters living here. Among them, there are nearly dozens of S-class monsters detected. The various levels of Warcraft below are even more numerous. Due to the rarity of S-class monsters, this has led to their high value and attracted the attention of many people. Therefore, it has also become the place where many S-class missions are performed. Moreover, the potential danger is not just monsters. The forest itself is also a big killer, because you never know, is there a deadly poison on the unremarkable leaves or weeds you reach out and touch? Roar! The sudden roar seemed to shock the entire forest. Luo Xingchen's forward pace also stopped. Look straight ahead. The gray figure slowly walked out of the jungle. The body on all fours is about 3 meters long. Beneath the silver-gray fur is a strong muscle whose outline can be seen at a glance. The protruding mouth is slightly open. The ferocious fangs seem to be flickering with cold light. Eyes glowing with scarlet light stared at Luo Xingchen. It's like looking at your prey. Swift wolf. It is a well-known monster in the western wilderness forest. Just like its name, strong and powerful limbs can bring the speed of the swift wolf beyond ordinary people. Moreover, since it is a magical beast, it naturally possesses magic power. And according to the records in the illustrated book, it is still a lightning magic. Looks like an adult. Luo Xingchen narrowed his eyes. After the swift wolf becomes an adult, the strength is almost comparable to that of a mages who are considered to be rated a rank. But the strength of a level is not the capital that the swift and fierce wolf can wantonly run amok in the western wilderness forest. The most important, the swift wolf, is a pack of monsters. He glanced at the surrounding jungle. As expected, the throbbing weeds proved that there was more than just a swift wolf around. Holmes seems to be surrounded. Chapter 59. Yolei's Dragon Slayer Magic. Roar the swift wolf in front of Luo Xingchen leaned down slightly and let out a low cry. The claws of the forelimbs constantly rubbed on the ground, making scratches. In an instant, the swift wolf moved. His scarlet eyes stared at Luo Xingchen, his limbs swaying violently. The speed of the explosion even caused a wave of air. CC thunder and lightning began to flicker along with the body of the swift wolf. His eyes narrowed. Luo Xingchen turned sideways. Let the sturdy claws wrapped in thunder and lightning pass in front of his eyes. Boom, the roar sounded, and the claws left a huge scar on the ground, due to the incident with thunder and lightning, so that there are some black marks on the ground. At the same time, the ferocious wolves around Luo Xingchen also attacked immediately. Countless roars mixed with thunder sounded at this moment. Without the slightest hesitation, Luo Xingchen reached out and grabbed the neck of the swift wolf in front of him. The arm jerked violently. He directly lifted it up and threw it towards the swift wolf attacking behind him. Boom! Accompanied by a dull, muffled sound. The two charging swift wolves were directly smashed to the ground. Luo Xingchen stepped on the ground, turned around, and took 2 steps back. Wrist. The golden badge appeared in his hand. Since it is Thunderbolt, just 640, let me try this. The badge was thrown into the air by Luo Xingchen. Sideways, dodged another swift wolf attack. The fist fell on top of its head. The huge force smashed it directly into the ground. The swift wolf seemed to want to get up, but a foot was already on its head. Let it continue to struggle, but it does not move at all. A golden magic circle spread out above Luo Xingchen. The scattered light gradually melted into his body. In an instant, violent power began to rise continuously within Luo Xingchen's body. Yolei's Dragon Slayer badge. Alt-UT, the sky blue thunder, and lightning gradually sounded all over Luo Xingchen. Unlike ordinary lightning, the thunderbolt that contains the power of divine punishment has an unimaginable ferocity. The swift wolf under his feet was still struggling. The right foot stepped on its head with a slight force. Crackling! The dazzling blue thunder light instantly enveloped the swift wolf under his feet. It was hard to imagine that the swift wolf, who was born with thunder and lightning magic, will be punished by thunder and lightning. In just a moment, Luo Xingchen smelled the stench from below, released the right foot, then lift up toward the opposite. He stopped and watched the wolves vigilantly. Kick it out! The swift wolf, with its hair erected by the electricity, directly moved at an extremely fast speed, fly towards the wolves. A young swift wolf didn't have time to react at all. Was knocked over. Such a move also seemed to interrupt the silence of the wolves. Completely angered this group of monsters. Ouch! Dozens of swift wolves opened their mouths at the same time. Yang Tian let out a deafening roar. Even the air began to flicker with sparks. Dozens of open mouths aimed at Luo Xingchen. Dazzling thunder light began to gather in their mouths. Then, it shot towards Luo Xingchen with a bang. In each lightning ball, they all contain magic power that rivals the full blow of an A-rank magician. And now, Luo Xingchen was directly wrapped by dozens of such lightning balls. This is the reason why the swift wolf was able to gain a foothold in the crisis-ridden West Wilderness Forest. It is also the reason why this place is known as a forbidden area for human beings. The dazzling thunder light illuminated Luo Xingchen's face. The intensity of thunder and lightning, and the power of terror. Even if you are far away, you can feel the numbness. Next moment, boom! Countless thunder lights fell around Luo Xingchen. Violent roar mixed with thunder and lightning is frantically sounding. Everything within a radius of 7 or 8 meters was completely shrouded in dazzling lightning. The swift wolves closed their open mouths. Pairs of scarlet eyes, just staring at the center of the thunder and lightning, just waiting for the thunder and lightning to dissipate, to swarm up and feast. The thunder and lightning that kept roaring began to shrink strangely. It is not a normal dissipation, but a reduction out of thin air. And from the center of the thunder and lightning came the sound of a big inhalation. Immediately, humanized doubts and puzzled appeared on the faces of countless swift and fierce wolves. Although he is a monster, he possesses a certain degree of wisdom, but not high, Therefore, they cannot understand the situation at hand. The reduction in lightning has reached the point where it is visible to the naked eye. Until now, they did not see clearly that the lightning had entered the mouth of the human in front of them. Lightning was swallowed? Wiping the corners of his mouth, Luo Xingchen slowly raised his head and looked at the bewildered wolves in front of him. Slowly opened his mouth, and the blue lightning began to gather. This scene, for the swift and fierce wolf pack, a bit familiar, but the sense of crisis contained in it is completely different. Yu Leilong's a low voice fell in the ears of the swift wolf pack, but it was as shocking as thunder. Almost from the instinct of the creature, the wolves gradually felt the fear. They began to retreat toward the rear. However, it was too late. The magic power has been accumulated. Luo Xingchen's whole body leaned forward violently. Roar! The gathered lightning turned into a huge thunder column several meters wide and shot out with a bang. Next moment, boom, boom, boom. The shocking explosion shocked the birds living in the forest. The huge impact brought the bodies of countless scorched black wolves, throwing it into the air dozens of meters. Crazy raging thunder and lightning destroyed countless flowers and trees. The high temperature contained in it will directly center on Luo Xingchen. The radius of about 100 meters was completely reduced to scorched earth. Just one hit. There are no more swift wolves around Luo Xingchen. The surrounding trees have turned to blackened charcoal, fell to the ground. And Luo Xingchen, the initiator of all this, flicking the Thunder Dragon Slayer badge in his hand, there was a slightly satisfied look on his face. He ignored the countless swift wolves that fell to the ground. Luo Xingchen turned around and walked deeper. Maybe it's because of time constraints. Luo Xingchen also quickened his pace. Moreover, he was very skeptical that he seemed to have chosen a farther path. After all, if it's close, there shouldn't be so many corners. Luo Xingchen was not surprised by this kind of thing. Anyway, it's been pretty unlucky lately. Maybe it's the price of getting the golden badge. As for why not go straight ahead, it is estimated that it will have to use brute force to penetrate one careful hill after another. The forest is not always smooth. In that way, I haven't seized the time to detour quickly. Anyway, as long as you reach the peak within 24 hours. So even if you pass the first level. But the more distant road also means the odds of encountering danger are multiplied. It's not just monsters like swift wolves that appear in packs. There are also many S-class monsters that act alone. Along the way, Luo Xingchen met no less than 10 times in total. If ordinary people, how can it survive 10 ultra-intensive battles? So, Fairy Tail's S-level assessment can be called the entire kingdom of Fiori. The most perverted test. Boom! Accompanied by huge smoke and roars. A body so huge that it was the size of the Fairy Tail Guild building completely collapsed to the ground. And Luo Xingchen. Finally, I saw the mountain in the middle of the West Wilderness Forest. It is also the final location of the examination. Chapter 61, your mission is to hit me. Please subscribe. The other side. The constant sound of thunder opened up the road to the foot of the mountain. Laxus came here with a scar, despite choosing a straight path, but it doesn't mean that there are no obstacles on this road. At best, it's just to get here earlier, it's just a little less than the other one. As a result, Laxus was injured, although not seriously, but it will also have an impact on the various battles that may unfold in the future. However, now Laxus doesn't care so much anymore. Look up. It was an almost 90-degree cliff, and his mission to climb this mountain. According to the regulations, although magic can be used, flying magic cannot be used. Therefore, I want to use the Thunderbolt to rush up in one go. Certainly would be considered to use flying magic. In other words, for Laxus, it will only be possible to climb. However, it's not difficult for me at this level. Without hesitation, Laxus charged directly towards the mountain. With one foot on the ground, the whole person relies on this powerful recoil ability. He jumped up high, and then clasped his hands on the rock that didn't protrude much. Started to crawl towards the top frantically. An altitude of more than 5,000 meters above sea level is not an easy task. However, considering that the player may fall off due to lack of physical strength in the middle. Therefore, Makarov also arranged teleportation magic around the mountain. If the player falls, it will be teleported to the ground for the first time. Therefore, there is no need to worry about anything unexpected. The other side of the mountain, due to the distance, is slightly far away. Luo Xingchen was nearly 10 minutes behind Laxus. But look at the cliffs in front of you. Luo Xingchen didn't plan to crawl with his bare hands. He stretched out his palm, and the golden light was gathering. The next moment, Ji Bing's Dragon Slayer badge appeared in his hands. Throw it up high, under the illumination of the magic circle. The dragon-killing power belonging to Ji Bing once again filled his body. He clenched his fists tightly, feeling the familiar power in his body. Luo Xingchen smiled slightly. He turned around and walked toward the back. Luo Xingchen didn't stop until he was about 100 meters away from the foot of the mountain. He turned around and stared at the top of the mountain so high that it broke through the clouds. Take a deep breath. The magic power began to gather on the feet, and the cold air suddenly erupted from Luo Xingchen's feet. The earthy yellow ground began to turn white at an alarming rate. It was a very icy color. Deep burning, cold air wafts around. Luo Xingchen slowly raised his right foot. Fall towards the midair. The next moment, the ice crystals spread up to the ground, and a staircase of ice about 15 to 17 centimeters high condensed under Luo Xingchen's feet. For Luo Xingchen to settle down. Immediately afterwards, the left foot was raised again and moved toward the top. The polar ice spread up again, forming a ladder. That's why Luo Xingchen is stepping back. After all, you have to leave enough angle for yourself to build the ice ladder. The sun approaching dusk cast an orange light, dyeing a different color for the white and flawless ice crystals. And above the ice crystals, the black-haired boy is walking up step by step toward the top of the mountain, toward the highest point. On the other side, the blonde-haired boy did not slack at all. The hands were rubbed with blood from the climbing. Intensive sweat oozes out from the forehead due to the heavy consumption of physical strength. However, he always gritted his teeth. Filled with resolute eyes, he did not move away from the highest point for a moment. Top of mountain. Unlike regular peaks, it is wide below and narrow above, because of its close to the shape of a cylinder. Therefore, the area here is also unusually large. And at the very center, a middle-aged man in a black cloak is sitting here bored. There's a dog's tail grass in the mouth. His eyes constantly glanced at the ends of the mountain tops on both sides. Seems to be a little tired. He put his hands on his knees and stood up. I twisted my neck, which was a little stiff from holding a movement for a long time. Then he turned his eyes to his right, smiled, as if waiting for something to come. Next moment, the pervasive cold air spreads to the edge of the cliff. The black-haired boy stepped on top of the khaki mountaintop. I didn't expect that you who chose the farther road would be the first to arrive. 35 stars. Gildarts smiled slightly. After all, my magic has the upper hand. 35 Luo Xingchen walked towards Gildarts. Coming to him, Luo Xingchen asked aloud, "So what is the second level?" Gildarts shook his head. "Don't worry. We'll have to wait until you're all here." Counting the time, Laxus is almost here. Laxus? Luo Xingchen's gaze turned to another direction. Flower's not much to say, combined with Makarov's words earlier, and Gildart's attitude to wait. Luo Xingchen basically guessed the content of the second assessment. As expected, it is to face Gildarts, the only S-rank wizard of Fairy Tale. He is also the strongest wizard of Fairy Tale at present. Under such oppression, did the two choose to fight on their own, or a common enemy? This is also a test for both of them. Sure enough, the assessment of an S-rank mage is definitely not that simple. For a while, the two men, one big and one small, waited again. After a full hour, there was finally movement at the edge of the cliff. A big hand stained with blood slapped on the cliff. Immediately after, Laxus climbed up. The intense consumption of physical strength made Laxus' chest rise and fall. But at the moment, Laxus is happy. Although I don't know what the final result will be. But now he has set foot on the highest mountain, he seems to have stepped halfway into the hurdle of an S-rank mage. Gildarts didn't speak. Rather, it gives full play to the spirit of humanity. after letting Laxus rest for a while. Then he clapped his hands and motioned for the two to come to him. Immediately, Laxus found Luo Xingchen, who had been waiting on the top of the mountain. Doubt mixed with disbelief filled his eyes. But soon he calmed down. Took a deep breath. Laxus didn't say anything. After all, it's just a temporary loss, and it must not be anything. Only the one who has the last laugh is the real winner. Congratulations to the two of you for passing the first test. 35 Guildarts spoke slowly. Overall, you're ahead of the allotted 24 hours by almost half of the time, which is remarkable. But boom! Magic gushes frantically from Guildart's body. The ground began to tremble. The sky began to howl. The birds perched on the top of the mountain are collapsing frantically. Then the second level has officially begun. And your task is to hit me. Guildarts looked directly at the two in front of him. Come on, young people who shoulder the future of fairy tale. 9 this moment. Fairy tale's strongest sorcerer towards the two boys. Issued the gauntlet. B. Chapter 62, Sanjiang versus Guildarts. Boom, boom, boom. The terrifying magic power was released wanton in the surroundings. The suffocating pressure seemed to hang over Luo Xingchen and Lax's heads. Cold sweat ran down Lax's cheeks. Even Luo Xingchen had a solemn expression on his face. Although know that Guildarts are strong. However, after the real experience, we can understand. What does it mean to be the strongest in fairy tale? Are we going to fight again? Luo Xingchen looked at Laxus beside him. Cut. Now it's not a question of whether we can fight or not. 35 Laxus pouted. His eyes were fixed on Guildarts ahead. Now if you want to advance to S rank, you have to join forces. As for the strongest, he turned his head to look at Luo Xingchen. Let's talk later. 35 cut, died Sundra. Luo Xingchen complained. Laxus's surprise was then ignored. Instead, he turned his gaze to Guildarts ahead. Although the 643 tube is filled with such terrifying magic power. But there was still a smile on his face, no matter in Luo Xingchen or Laxus' memory. I have never seen Guildarts really serious. The ground began to disintegrate into small stones under this magic. Then it was blown up and scattered around Guildarts. This is the magic that only Guildarts has so far. Super advanced, smashing magic. This magic has an indescribably powerful destructive power. It can even shatter the atomic connections of the matter it comes into contact with in an instant. However, due to its difficult-to-grasp characteristics, so much so that even when Guildarts was distracted, it will also inadvertently destroy everything it touches. This is Guildarts. This is Fairy Tale's strongest mage in active duty. And this is also the ability that Luo Xingchen has been longing for. What's the matter? If you're standing in the same place, I can't judge you qualified. 39 Guildarts raised his arms slowly, reaching out and beckoning. Just what I want. Laxus accepted Guildart's challenge. Lightning flashed frantically all over his body. Laxus, who turned into lightning, has a speed that surpasses the speed of ordinary people. A curve was drawn in midair, heading straight for Guildarts. The fist wrapped in thunder and lightning slammed down. There was no wiggle room left. After all, in front of an opponent of this level, any omission will be the key to defeat. Facing Laxus' fist, Guildart's face didn't change, just slightly sideways, dodging Laxus' attack. Then, he raised his right hand and clenched his palm into a fist. Aiming at Laxus' back, he fell with a thud. Boom! With a popping sound, Laxus' body sank directly into the ground. The floor burst in an instant. Countless cracks spread all around like cobwebs. On the other side, the rapidly advancing figure stirred up a raging gale. Blow up Guildart's orange hair. One to cover and one to attack. Guildarts murmured. It's really hard to imagine that you would cooperate so well. 5. Although talking, but there was no hesitation in the movement of Guildart's hands. The palm that had just defeated Laxus swept across the air. Next moment, Luo Xingchen's figure appeared here. Facing Guildart's attack, Luo Xingchen immediately raised his arms. Boom! The terrifying force directly acted on Luo Xingchen's hands. This is the first time Luo Xingchen met a human with such power as a cannonball with just one blow. The feet are constantly rubbing against the ground. Two not-so-shallow ravines were drawn. At the same time, a dazzling golden thunderbolt erupted beneath Gildart's feet. Laxus jumped to his feet, wrapped a fist of lightning down to Gildart's jaw. "Great time to fight back," Gildarts exclaimed. The other hand that had been free all along quickly reached out. Putting it on the chin, it directly caught Laxus' fist. The muscles in Gildart's arm swelled at the moment. Hold his arm tightly, as if throwing a shot put, directly dragging Laxus' entire body. He threw it in the direction of Luo Xingchen, who had just stabilized his body. "What a joke!" Luo Xingchen frowned. Immediately, he stretched out his hands to help Laxus, who flew out backwards. Immediately, that terrifying force struck again. Fortunately, Luo Xingchen had stabilized at this time. This was not directly shot. "Are you okay?" After putting Laxus down, Luo Xingchen asked without looking back. "No." Laxus didn't say much. In other words, at this moment, all his energy has been placed on Gildarts in front of him. The first attack failed. Let Laxus understand one thing clearly. This unassuming uncle is beyond imagination and powerful. Shaking his arms, Luo Xingchen said in a deep voice, "Don't forget, Gildarts haven't used magic yet." Laxus' heart sank even more. Indeed, Gildarts hasn't used magic yet. The two of them were repelled with just the strength of their physical bodies. And that's one of the reasons why Gildarts is known as fairy tale's strongest wizard. That unbelievable gymnastics. "You're still being tucked away. Do your best," Luo Xingchen said. His hands gradually spread a cold air. And Laxus was silent for a moment. Not hiding either. The magic within the body began to slant out crazily. The already well-defined muscles began to expand continuously until it burst his shirt. The thunder and lightning seemed to be more violent. Thunder Dragon and Extreme Ice Dragon 35 looked at the two people in front. Gildarts murmured, "Boom!" This is the sound of the ground under Luo Xingchen's feet being directly shattered by some powerful force. Above the fist filled with cold air, the white ice crystals are constantly extending. Extreme Ice Dragons, split fist. Feeling the terrifying power of the blow, even Gildarts didn't feel slighted. The magic began to flow. He stretched out his palm towards Luo Xingchen's fist. The pale white light formed a mesh-like attack that penetrated the polar ice, covering Luo Xingchen's fist. Subsequently, the glove formed by the extreme ice shattered directly into pieces of cube-shaped shards of ice that scattered in the air. It's not over yet. 33 seems to have expected the ice cubes to be shattered. Luo Xingchen's right foot has taken a step back, then kicked it straight at Gildart's cheek. Extreme Ice Dragon's Broken Claw. A quick kick through the air, as if swiping 1.1 broke the air, right on Gildart's cheek. Ugh. The unexpected attack made Gildarts a little stunned. Immediately afterwards, the whole person directly retreated a few steps away. The next moment, Luo Xingchen jumped straight into the sky. Because Luo Xingchen's body has already jumped up, Laxus, who had been hiding behind him, was exposed. At this moment, the lightning in Laxus' mouth had accumulated to a peak. Aiming at Gildarts, who had not yet stood firm, he shot out, "Thunder Dragons, roar!" At the same time, Luo Xingchen above the sky also opened his mouth. The magic is rapidly gathering. Extreme Ice Dragons, roar. 99 The cold snap and the thunder hit Gildart's position without any deviation. The interweaving of magic and magic caused a terrifying explosion. Gildarts, who was at the center of the explosion, was completely shrouded in thunder and cold snaps. Chapter 63 Fusion, Sublimation. Did it work? Laxus gasped. His eyes were fixed on the figure in the center of the explosion in front of him. How could it be so easy? That guy's a veritable monster. Luo Xingchen fell on the ground, said without looking back. Indeed, as Luo Xingchen said, at the center of the explosion, Gildarts stepped out. There was still a smile on his face. "It's just a little awkward." "It's amazing, boys," he exclaimed without hesitation. He reached out and patted the dust on the cloak. Then he looked at the two of them. "However, if you want to become an S-rank mage, that's not enough. The rising magic power blew Luo Xingchen's bangs. He said in a low voice, "You don't need to tell me. I also know that it was just a warm-up. I have to be S rank." Laxus also clenched his fists. Next moment, it's like having a heart. The two moved at the same time. Attacked Gildarts. The first thing that came was the huge lightning ball that was lifted above his head by Laxus. What resounds in the sky is the roar of the summoning thunder, which falls from the sky, turning everything into ashes, and the thunder suppresses the furious waves. Accompanied by roars, the gathered lightning bolted towards Gildarts. 22, but despite the thunder and lightning, Gildarts remained unhurried. Arm raised, the magic began to surge. Crush it. The white halo formed a huge grid that enveloped the lightning of Laxus. Although not real, but the grid-like halo will still be submerged in the huge light ball of thunder and lightning next moment. Under the attack of the white giant net, the lightning of Laxus shattered directly. It's broken down into tiny magic element particles, dissipated in the air. Moreover, the white light net seemed to have the energy to attack Laxus. This guy, what a monster! With deep fear, Laxus immediately retreated to the rear, dodging the blow by a risk. At the same time, Gildarts, who had just attacked, didn't pause for a moment, but turned around immediately. The clenched fist went straight to Luo Xingchen, who was attacking. Immediately after, fist to fist collided. The violent impact turned into a gust of wind and spread instantly. It completely blows away the countless smoke and dust in the surrounding. Gildarts is undoubtedly stronger than Luo Xingchen. Therefore, Luo Xingchen fell directly into the disadvantage at the moment of bumping his fists. The whole person was pushed backwards by Gildarts. But the punch wasn't for nothing. White ice crystals began to spread upward toward Gildarts through Luo Xingchen's arm. Biting chill, even this powerful middle-aged uncle shuddered unconsciously. "You are really strong, Xingchen." Gildarts has since increased the strength of his arms again. No doubt, Gildarts is much more serious now than before. Luo Xingchen was knocked back a few meters with one punch. Laxus, who had just evaded his attack, jumped up again. Fists, feet, constantly greeted Gildarts. And Gildarts is constantly swinging his body. Dodge Laxus' attack. Then he found the right time and punched him in the abdomen. Unimaginable force struck, and Laxus' eyes snapped. The mouth coughed up blood. The whole person flew out directly. It didn't give Gildarts the slightest respite. He was attacked by Luo Xingchen just after knocking Laxus up. Then the roar of thunder. The ever-present chilling chill. But it made Gildarts more vigilant. At this moment, Luo Xingchen touched his hands together. A dazzling, icy blue light flickered in his hands. Extreme Ice Dragon. Ice and Snow World. He raised his hands high and then slammed into the ground. Moment. Frost began to expand wildly with Luo Xingchen as the center until it covers the top of the entire mountain. The surrounding temperature began to plummet. Even in the air, countless tiny ice crystals began to condense and fell on the ground. The surging cold, it seemed that the surroundings were completely turned into ice and snow in an instant. At this moment, Gildarts only had time to stretch out his arm. It was completely frozen into an ice sculpture by the cold air. However, Luo Xingchen's eyes still did not mean to relax. Instead, he just stared at the ice sculpture in front of him. Sure enough, cracks began to appear in the polar ice like a work of art. Immediately after, cracks began to spread around. As if it had reached a critical point, the ice shattered. Gear Dazer, shivering from the cold, showed his figure. This kid, it's unexpected. He shrugged. He could feel Luo Xingchen in this environment. The strength is definitely not on the same level as just now. Think of this. Gildarts squatted down, fists clenched. Aim at the ice surface below and smash it out directly. Boom! Under the violent roar, the ground was under attack from Gildarts. Started shaking violently. The terrifying magic turned into an overwhelming white net of light. Completely enveloped the surrounding ice. Under this power, the ice blocks that had frozen the entire summit were divided into large and small cubes. Then it was pulled by this force and flew into the air. The violent shaking of the earth, the rising of countless ice cubes, Luo, Xingchen, and Laxus, who were above the ice, were directly enveloped in it. After a long time, the scene returned to calm. And at this moment, looking around, the landscape seems to have been completely changed. Countless smashed cubes are scattered all around, stacked up to form the ground on which Gildart stood. And not far from him, Laxus has completely fallen into ruins. The violent ups and downs of his chest proved that he was not feeling well at the moment. And aside, Luo Xingchen, who was kneeling on one knee, was also adjusting his rapid breathing. Although it's not the first time I've said it, it's amazingly strong kid, obviously still so young. Gildarts shook his head slightly, exclamation in his tone. Gildarts, as expected of the strongest monster I've ever met, but taking a deep breath, Luo Xingchen's breathing gradually became steady. Then he slowly stood up. Next is the main event. He slowly closed his eyes. Luo Xingchen began to communicate the magic sublimator in his mind. At the same time, his hands slowly spread out 643. Bright golden light converges on both hands. In the end, two magic crystal badges inscribed with ferocious dragons were formed. What is surging is the extreme cold current, and what is roaring in the sky is the thunder of punishment. 95 compatibility and unity. That is, extremely ice and quiet thunder. Unexplained magical incantations slowly spit out from Luo Xingchen's mouth. The two badges in the hand burst out so far, the brightest light. The badge turned into countless light spots and floated towards the sky. They converged on the heads of Luo Xingchen on both sides. Next moment, two ferocious giant dragons on the left and the right let out a roaring roar in the golden light. Luo Xingchen also abruptly opened his eyes. Fusion sublimation. The indifferent mechanical sound seemed to reverberate in his mind. It seems to be resounding between heaven and earth. The dragon behind Luo Xingchen got the order. He fluttered his wings enough to cover the sky. He rushed towards Luo Xingchen in front. The fingertips of his hands began to grow sharp fingernails. Immediately afterwards, the entire pair of arms turned into the claws of the dragon. The clothes behind him were torn by dragon wings from the corners of his eyes. Blue scales began to appear in order to form a mysterious pattern up to the neck. Even the original black, broken hair began to turn towards sky blue. Double dragon mode, extreme ice, and thunder dragon form. The mechanical sound echoed in his mind. Luo Xingchen slowly raised his eyes that turned into vertical pupils, staring straight at Gildarts ahead. Gildarts didn't know if it was an illusion. In short, I seem to be being targeted by a giant dragon. Chapter 64. Gildarts who gets seriously varied. Laxus, who struggled to get up, looked at the scene in front of him in horror. Himself as a dragon slayer. Naturally, it can be noticed. At this moment, Luo Xingchen exudes. It's the smell of dragons. No, it should be said that he is a dragon at the moment. But look at the azure blue lightning that is constantly shining around Luo Xingchen. Laxus didn't quite understand it. He knew that Luo Xingchen's magic was extremely cold dragon slaying magic. But never heard of it. Luo Xingchen actually possesses the thunder-type dragon slaying magic? Laxus stared blankly at Luo Xingchen, who was completely different at the moment. Incredibly murmured, "Is this your true power?" Even Gildarts seemed to be briefly stunned. But soon he reacted. The eyes looking at Luo Xingchen also began to get excited. "What a surprise, kid!" He stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "Come on, let me see you in this state. How strong is it? You won't be disappointed, Gildarts." 39's dragon claws clenched instantly with both hands. The dragon wings behind Luo Xingchen violently fanned, bringing a violent wind. And Luo Xingchen also rushed out. The clenched dragon claws are ready to go. Is it the same trick? Gildarts responded immediately, feet slightly bent. Aiming at Luo Xingchen's fist, he greeted him. Gildarts caught Luo Xingchen's fist. But although the move is the same straight punch as before, but the strength to carry is like a world of difference. In the instant of contact, Gildarts paid the price for his carelessness. The arm was directly knocked back. The fist, wrapped in dragon scales, slammed heavily into his abdomen. The terrifying power even made Gildarts open his mouth uncontrollably. Eyes bulged sharply. The whole person quickly retreated towards the rear. His feet rubbed constantly on the ground, creating a ravine of more than 10 meters. Nice! Gildart smiled and touched the corner of his mouth. Opposite did not rejoice in repelling Gildarts. Luo Xingchen landed on both feet and bent slightly. Then it popped out directly. The dragon's claws came out, and the thunder and lightning mixed with the cold air went straight to Gildart's face. Gildarts moved too. Like a loach, his body slid under Luo Xingchen's dragon claws. The violent fist went straight to Luo Xingchen's cheek. Luo Xingchen raised his arm, and the white ice crystals instantly condensed into a thick shield. The fist landed on the shield, and the ice crystal suddenly burst open. However, Luo Xingchen's figure has been lost behind the shield. Gildarts reacted immediately, looking up into the sky. At this moment, Luo Xingchen, who was flying with the help of his wings, has raised his right leg, slashing hard at Gildarts. Boom! The attack fell on Gildart's shoulder gang. The terrifying impact seemed to crush Gildarts to the ground. The relatively flat ground beneath Gildart's feet began to emit countless grid-like, dazzling rays of light. Immediately afterwards, the ground shattered instantly. About 10 meters deep, a depth of hundreds of meters wide appeared at the feet of Gildarts. Shred the ground under your feet to cushion it. Watching Gildarts get out of his own attack due to the extra sinking space, Luo Xingchen exclaimed in surprise. At this moment, Gildarts has come to Luo Xingchen's side. Spreading out his palm, magic power burst out. Be careful, Xingchen. 35 The white halo turned into a net of light enough to cover Luo Xingchen. In just a moment, Luo Xingchen was approached. Thunder and lightning began to make crazy noises. The blue light of thunder and lightning enveloped Luo Xingchen. Transformed into lightning, he evaded at an extremely fast speed. And with this lightning speed, Luo Xingchen bullied himself again. The dragon's claws wrapped in ice were raised high, and the thunder and lightning flashed on it. Extreme Ice Thunder Dragon's Thunderbolt Ice Shatter. Crush it! Magic surged out, and Gildarts raised his halo-covered arm. Bang! One, the terrifying roar seemed to tear Laxus' eardrums apart. The dazzling light even made him unable to open his eyes. But with sensitive senses, he could still feel the magic power that was raging in front of him. Finally, sensing the fading light, Laxus opened his eyes. The entry was a devastated, disembodied ground, in the center of the magic confrontation ahead. The two figures flew out directly. Flying towards this side is Luo Xingchen. Laxus quickly stood up and caught his body with both hands. But the impact was so great that Laxus was knocked flying. Fortunately, Luo Xingchen Daofei's body was also forcibly stopped. On the opposite side, after Gildarts flipped around in the air to adjust his posture, fall toward the ground. One hand touched the ground, the other fell to one knee. The whole person slid tens of meters toward the rear in this posture before stopping. Thank you. Luo Xingchen put his hands on the ground and got up. He thanked Laxus, who also stood up beside him. Don't get me wrong, I just didn't have time to dodge. 39 Laxus pouted, resisting the injury that did not improve on his body, he said. Luo Xingchen shook his head helplessly and said, "It's all this time, and I'm still stubborn." Laxus didn't respond, and Luo Xingchen didn't pursue it either. Breathing heavily, he looked in the direction of Gildarts. He murmured, "This uncle is really perverted." Although in the just confrontation, Luo Xingchen barely drew with Gildarts. No, it would be an exaggeration to say it was a tie. It can even be said that Luo Xingchen was at a disadvantage in the confrontation just now. Since learning magic, this is something that has never happened. And, it's not all Gildarts can do. Hey, are you all right? Watching Luo Xingchen panting violently, Laxus asked aloud. Luo Xingchen waved his hand. It's just that the consumption of magic power is too great. Indeed, using this form, although Luo Xingchen's strength has been improved by more than one grade. But the speed at which mana was consumed was unexpectedly violent. He glanced at Laxus, who was on the side. "It's you, can you still fight? You've recovered a lot. You should still worry about yourself." Laxus responded. Opposite Gildarts also stood up, on cheeks full of dust and tiny scars. Hanging is admiration and a happy smile. "Actually, the assessment has reached this point, and your strengths are logically qualified," he said softly. Although the distance is far and the sound is low, but it was still heard clearly by Luo Xingchen and Laxus. But he changed his words. The smile on his face gradually disappeared and became extremely serious. "Because you're really too good, therefore, the requirements for treating you will be much higher than those for others. Is the king good? Even the president has such expectations for you." Boom! The ground began to tremble wildly. "So, I will not show mercy to you." A suffocating magic force erupted from Gildart's body. The concentrated magic even forms a substantial white beam of light. Soar to the sky. The ice crystals originally left by Luo Xingchen on Gildarts began to shatter. Varied, Laxus widened his eyes. Sweat dripped out his forehead. Look at Gildarts wrapped in white beams of light. He just found out. It turns out how far he is from the real powerhouse. Boom, 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 the orange hair is blown up by magic. His emotionless eyes turned scarlet under the white beam of light. The shabby cloak behind him was blown high. Gildarts just looked at the two in front of him. "Come on, attack me." 35 on the trembling earth, the strongest wizard of fairy tale who is completely serious, is quietly waiting for the decision of the young people. Chapter 65, Persistent Youth. Firm while the setting sun hangs above the line where the sky and the earth meet in the distance. Above the top of the cylindrical mountain that penetrates into the sky, it is a devastated land that has been beyond recognition. The center of the earth. Dazzling white light soars into the sky. A terrifying sense of oppression was unreservedly exerted on the two teenagers in front of him. It was like carrying a huge mountain out of thin air, as if to completely bend the spines of the teenagers. In a forest below the cliff, Makarov sat alone on the raised stone. Feel the terrifying magic surrounding you, and the earth that began to vibrate underfoot. Makarov slowly closed his eyes. Should I return the sword to its sheath knowing my own weakness, or should I clench the sword and march forward bravely? Makarov murmured softly. Let me see. Your determination, dull, suffocating, and painful. This kind of emotion surrounds the two of them. Sweat dripped down his cheeks, dripping to the ground. "Ha ha!" Laxus gasped heavily. The gradually blurred eyes stared at the figure in the light beam ahead. His whole body trembled under this oppression, but he still didn't look away. The inner voice was telling him that he must not give up. As long as he moves forward, what he has always pursued and longed for is called the glory of the strong. Can be caught by him, biting her lip hard. The smell of 643's blood seemed to restore his sight to a brief period of clarity. He took trembling steps forward, although the body is almost unable to straighten up. Although his body was soaked with sweat, he was still moving forward. Step by step, the tremors of the legs became more frequent. Sometime, he seemed to take a step forward. With a look of astonishment and unwillingness, Laxus fell forward uncontrollably. Is it about to end? Can only stop here. Damn it, no matter how unhappy I am. But he no longer has any strength to balance his body. The ground was getting closer and closer to his eyes. However, there was no dull sound as expected. He was caught. Like a dragon's claws grabbed his weak arm. He propped up his entire body. Laxus raised his head and looked at Luo Xingchen, who was beside him. Although under such pressure, Luo Xingchen's forehead also seeped sweat. His eyebrows were also tightly wrinkled together, but his body was still straight. Is the gap that big? Laxus had such a question in his heart, but it was quickly dismissed, because at this moment, in front of such a pressure surface CCBB, all this has lost its meaning. He and Luo Xingchen faced the same predicament. Are you going to admit defeat, or desperately stepped forward and waved his fist. Although that might not change anything. Still, can you move? Luo Xingchen's tone was not calm, some even intermittently, but it strengthened Lax's heart even more. Indeed, Luo Xingchen in front of him seemed to never give up. And Laxus, who has always regarded it as his biggest rival. How can you give up so easily? Just to this extent. How could he fall? Don't worry, you can't die. Laxus smiled weakly. Really strong. Luo Xingchen responded while dragging Laxus forward. Why help me? Laxus moved with difficulty. Why? There aren't that many whys in this world. Luo Xingchen gritted his teeth and smiled. If you really want to say, I just don't want to see a person who has worked hard and tried his best, but didn't get the results he deserved. Looking at Luo Xingchen at the moment, Laxus fell silent. Yes, obviously you have worked so hard, but has never received positive reviews. All this is just because of his grandpa, named Makarov, not just the president of the Fairy Tale Guild. He is also one of the 10 holy wizards who are famous throughout the continent. His aura was too shining enough to overshadow all his efforts. From childhood to adulthood, for 17 years, Laxus has always lived under this aura. No matter what he accomplishes, there is no way to escape words like, as expected of the grandson of Lord Makarov. Until now, I have never escaped. He has always wanted to prove himself. Proving that he can get to where he is today has always been the result of his own efforts. Proof that he never relied on his grandpa's fame. He turned his head slightly and looked at Luo Xingchen's profile. He smiled slowly and said, Thanks. You don't need to thank you for helping you. It doesn't take much effort after all. 5 Luo Xingchen looked directly at Gildarts and said without looking back, Maybe. Laxus didn't hesitate. The two of them walked towards Gildarts, one after the other. The trembling footsteps left deep footprints on the ground. Very good. Looking at the two of them, Gildarts made no sarcasm. Wrapped in a white light, he slowly raised the corner of his mouth, but did not stop the two of them. Instead, stand quietly, waiting for the teenagers to come to him. Unleash a punch full of awareness. As they approached, the two figures supporting each other approached Gildarts. The closer, the pressure of terror around him grew even stronger. However, under such pressure, the teenagers became more relaxed. They had smiles on their faces. Like a victor. Why don't you admit defeat? He looked at the two in front of him. Gildarts questioned. Laxus looked directly at Gildarts, who was surrounded by a beam of light. If he was still afraid of it just now. And now, as he approaches Gildarts, the fear seemed to vanish. If I admit defeat, what's the point of my sweat? Laxus spoke with difficulty. I can accept my defeat, but I absolutely cannot accept that I admit defeat halfway. Even if I can't do it now, but one day I will definitely reach the peak you touched, and then draw you down. Firm words speak of the boy's determination. Gildart smiled and nodded. He seemed to see the potential of a strong man in Laxus. Looking at Luo Xingchen, he seemed to be looking forward to it. Looking forward to this young man who has always been the most optimistic, what will be the answer? My reason is simple, as if aware of Gildart's expectations. Luo Xingchen spoke, and there was no sense of fear in his tone. In my dictionary, there are no two words to admit defeat. 55. I deeply know that this world is too big, and there are countless powerful people. I also deeply know how weak I am now. But my own weakness will only become the reason for me to become stronger. As long as my belief is strong enough, I can defeat even strong enemies. 9. Even death. There's no way for me to let go of my clenched fist. Gildarts laughed. What a simple obsession. He looked at the two with admiration in their eyes. I feel your firm will, and I don't blame anyone who has the courage to challenge me. And I don't despise those who concede defeat in front of me. 35. No matter what you choose, as long as there's a reason that convinces me. That's enough. The smile on his face gradually brightened, and he raised his arm. Come on then, throw your last punch. 35. Let's draw a perfect end to your promotion assessment. Chapter 66. After 2 years, the new badge is in hand. Magic power began to erupt from Luo Xingchen's body. He turned his head and looked at Laxus, who was beside him. Are you okay? Don't worry. At least you still have the strength for the final blow. 35 Laxus responded loudly. Golden yellow thunder and lightning wrapped around his body. The two moved towards Gildarts together and started running, stomping your feet on the ground. Luo Xingchen jumped high. His eyes locked on Gildarts in the beam of light ahead. The mouth opened sharply. Magical energy began to frantically move towards Luo Xingchen's mouth, gathering. In the end, it turned into a cold air and a flickering thunder. Laxus below seemed to have completely drained every drop of magic in his body. Bring it all together in the right fist at least. The dazzling golden thunder and lightning increased wildly in his hands. Extreme ice thunder dragons, the howling of cold thunder. Dragon slaying profound truth. Ming Yule, facing the azure blue lightning above the magic storm formed by the cold current. There is also a giant fist formed by bright golden thunder and lightning in front of it. Gildarts seemed to see the three-headed dragon growling in front of him. He raised his right fist slowly. Immediately, the surrounding pure white light beam expanded instantly. The two people in the sky and the ground were directly wrapped in it. At the same time, Gildarts' fist was completely enveloped by a brighter white halo. Gildarts waved his fist at the incoming attack. Destroy the evil and show the righteous one day. Boom, boom, boom. The magic of crazy intersection was completely detonated. The ground began to shake, not the ground on the top of the mountain where Luo Xingchen's people were, but at the foot of the mountain, the ground where Makarov was. The crazy vibration caused countless beasts to flee. Countless birds flew into the air. Under Makarov's horrified gaze, the top of the huge, cylindrical mountain that originally stood in the center of the forest began to collapse. Numerous shattered gravels were scattered throughout the forest. Huge smoke and dust began to fill the surroundings, as if to cover the entire sky until long time. Only then did Makarov see what the mountaintops had become under the smoke. It was originally a cylindrical mountain with an altitude of more than 5,000 meters. About a third of them were destroyed. That is to say, the elevation of the entire mountain has dropped by more than 1,600 meters out of thin air. What? These bastards, what did they do? Makarov's eyes widened. There was a terrified cry. A long time, in Makarov's sight, Gildarts got Luo Xingchen and Laxus out of the jungle ahead. At this moment, Laxus is the worst. Almost the whole body is covered with dense scars. He lowered his head and seemed to be in a coma. As for Luo Xingchen on the other side, there were patches of blue and purple on his handsome cheeks. His right arm shrugged weakly beside him, but in good shape, and Gildarts kept talking. And Gildarts. This guy wasn't unscathed either. The big orange back that was neatly groomed was also scattered. Maybe it's because of lightning. Straight hair became a little curly. The right cheek was bulging high, and even the words were a little confused. There are also large and small potholes in the clothes. It could be described as embarrassing, so that when a few people came back, Gildarts is still bickering with Luo Xingchen. She was clamoring for the question of who killed him just now. You little bastards, do you know what you did? Looking at the three of them, Makarov made sure that there were no major problems with them. He roared immediately. His aged face was full of horror. The trembling hands kept pointing at the mountain behind, Luo Xingchen and others. Ha! That was an accident. An accident. 9 Gildarts scratched the back of his head and explained with a laugh. There was no guilt in the tone of anything wrong. Anyway, it's going too far. Looking at Gildarts, slapped haha, Makarov sighed helplessly. He seemed to have thought. The scene where he is about to be called by the council for questioning. Maybe I have to write a review book. The most important thing. I'm afraid it's about losing money. How much money should I accompany to destroy a mountain? Thinking of this, Makarov suddenly felt exhausted. Waited for nearly dozens of minutes in the West Wilderness Forest. Laxus finally woke up. At first glance, I saw Makarov, who was sighing constantly. Doubts flooded his mind. Covering his head, Laxus stood up from the ground. Glancing to the side, Luo Xingchen and Gildarts were sitting not far away. By the way, how's the S-level assessment? He looked at everyone suspiciously. In the previous battle, Laxus used the last resort. Immediately fell into a coma. He had no idea what happened after that. Yo, wake up. He heard his grandson's voice. Makarov recovered immediately. Looking at Laxus, since you are awake, then I will announce your final assessment results. He jumped onto a higher rock. Looking at the two people below after lightly coughing twice, he said solemnly, in this assessment, Gildarts and I are watching your performance one by one. 9. Whether it is strength, wisdom, or perseverance. And most importantly, the mind. FTX. Makarov paused. His eyes swept back and forth between the two of them. Finally, he said slowly, so, I declare that you two are qualified. Haha, congratulations, the new S-rank mages. Gildarts patted Luo Xingchen and Laxus on the shoulders. A loud voice echoed in the forest. Damn it, my shoulder hurts, a whole Gildarts. Luo Xingchen complained and covered his right shoulder. The eyes of Laxus on the side flickered a little. S-class. After nearly a whole day of struggle, the assessment of Luo Xingchen and Laxus finally came to an end. Moreover, both of them achieved satisfactory results. Laxus finally took the first step towards the strength in himself. As for whether it will go crooked in the future, it is not very clear. At least, now Laxus is not so extreme thinking. And the most rewarding is undoubtedly Luo Xingchen. It's not just the title of S-rank magician. The main thing is to get the power of Gildarts. On the way back, Luo Xingchen walked last alone. Looking at the bright golden badge in his hand, he smiled slightly. On the emblem decorated with golden patterns, Gildart's portrait is inscribed on the magic crystal badge. Below his drawing, Crash, smashing, is unusually eye-catching. Crash magic crystal badge. This is after the previous battle was over, condensed from the magic power Luo Xingchen collected on top of the Broken Mountain. Since 2 years ago, after obtaining Yolei's Dragon Slayer badge, Luo Xingchen didn't get a new badge until now. And the magic contained in it is an ultra-rare, smashing magic. This had to make Luo Xingchen secretly delighted. However, to draw the Gildarts badge, I am afraid there's also the reason why Luo Xingchen sacrificed his luck for another 5 years. Of course, this thing is just superstition, unbelievable. Therefore, Luo Xingchen didn't care either. Anyway, get something done. Xingchen, hurry up, it's almost time for Magnolia. Makarov's urging voice came from ahead. Okay, replied after a sentence. Take the magic crystal back to your system space. Luo Xingchen walked in the direction of Magnolia B. Chapter 67. Welcome back, stars. Magnolia, fairy tale. Today's guild is as noisy as ever. Even because of Makarov's absence, the guild will be more noisy than usual. For example, on a small table, all the juniors in the guild gathered here. Noisy voices kept on ringing. How come they haven't come back? President, I really want to know who became the S-rank magician. 35 Natsu rested his chin on one hand and stared at the door. I think Brother Xingchen is very likely. Lee-san sat beside Mira Jane. He spoke his opinion softly. Indeed, the strength of Xingchen should be stronger, and the probability of becoming S-rank will be much higher. Urza nodded. Because of the perennial mission with Luo Xingchen. Therefore, Urza is also more aware of Luo Xingchen's strength. Anyway, whether it's the stars or the 647 Texas, I will hit them. Seems to be thinking of something exciting. Natsu stepped on the table. He spoke his rhetoric out loud. You better rest. As my defeated general, still want to provoke Xingchen? Gray on the side pouted. For Natsu's words, obviously disdain. Huh? You actually said that I was your defeated general? Natsu glared at Gray in disapproval and said, Last time, I remember that I beat you. When did you beat me up? Gray stood up without showing weakness. Replied, Just today, an hour ago. You fart. It was me who won an hour ago. Okay. 9. Look at the two people who put their heads together. Kana helped her forehead helplessly. Really? Here it is again. 99. You stopped me. Seeing that the two were about to scuffle together. Urza couldn't sit still. With a slap on the table, he stood up and glared at Gray and Natsu. I was wrong. 99 sorry. The two stood up straight for a moment, daring not to move at all, and sincerely apologized. Upon seeing this, Urza nodded slightly, When I was about to say something to educate these two guys, untimely words rang out. Don't be afraid. Fight if you want. Don't care what this armored woman says. Immediately, Lysana and Elfman shuddered, looking at sitting beside him with his arms around him, Mira Jane with her feet on the table. He looked at Urza with a gloomy face again. They suddenly felt that things seemed to be going in an unpredictable direction. Urza squinted. Mira Jane, are you condoning family fights? Exposing women? Don't put on the stinky face of your predecessors. You can do whatever others like. And use you as a fat pig? 99 Mira Jane retracted her feet from the table. Standing up, he looked at Urza badly. You just said the word, fat pig? Skinny girl, what's the reason? The fat pig won't let me talk about it. Looks like we're going to continue our last duel. Mira Jane. I'll beat you to tears this time, Urza. Sister. Elfman seemed to want to stop, but was stopped by Lysana. Brother Elfman, if you're not afraid of getting hurt by accident, go ahead. Lysana reminded with a serious face. Let's get out of here quickly. This place will soon become a battlefield. Kana picked up her glass. Take Lysana and Elfman to hide in the distance. Several people just left not long ago. The crackling sound echoed in the guild. Not just Urza and Mira Jane, and Natsu and Gray on the side, after realizing that Urza didn't have time to take care of himself. Two people who don't like each other, he picked up his fist again and did it. A time. The entire guild was attracted by the fighting here. Come on, Urza! Macau was holding a beer mug and kept booing. Mira Jane uppercut hit Urza's jaw. Waka Bar followed suit. How could Gray be beaten by Natsu? The guild member Valian shook his head. No. Gray fought back and Natsu was sent flying. 35 Ladaisu clenched his fists, as if more excited than Natsu Gray. Hey, Natsu seems to be flying towards us. Vijiter, who was dancing beside him, was stunned. The next moment, Natsu directly overturned a crowd of spectators. BD Natsu, my drawing! 5 Ladaisu wailed at the tattered drawing board smashed by Natsu. Why are Urza and Mira Jane coming this way too? Macau made a panic sound. Only you don't come here. Wakaba kept shaking his arms. He wanted to escape, but he was immediately caught up in it. The battle started to get bigger and bigger. To this point, it doesn't matter what the reason for the fight is. If you don't fight back, then I'm afraid it's you who gets KO. For a time, the entire guild was affected. Outside the door, Makarov, who was at the forefront, always felt his right eyelid twitch. Hey, what's the matter? He rubbed his eyes. Makarov murmured. Suddenly he froze in place. Could it be that the matter of these 3 people destroying the central peak of the West Wilderness Forest has been exposed? 55, don't worry, President. Luo Xingchen on the side said nonchalantly. Those who should come can't hide. Those who want to run can't run away. Just let it be. Does this count as comforting words? Makarov shook his head helplessly. Then put another way, maybe it's something else? Luo Xingchen said, looking at the familiar building ahead. Luo Xingchen said without thinking, in case those people are tearing down the house. That's impossible. Before I left, I asked Urza to help watch those bastards. 99. After all, only Urza can cure those people. Makarov continued to shake his head. Obviously do not think there is such a possibility. While talking, several people have come to the gate of the guild, although the door is tightly closed. But I can vaguely hear all kinds of 1.1 noises coming from inside. No way. Makarov slowly opened the door. An unknown thing strikes in an instant. Snapped. The plate that flew from inside hit Makarov directly on the head. The plate shattered and Makarov crashed to the ground. Looking at this scene, Luo Xingchen twitched the corners of his mouth. His eyes turned to the guild. As the door was pushed open, the chaotic guild members stopped their movements one after another, looking in the direction of the door. The most conspicuous, right in front, Urza, who was pinching each other with Mira Jane, blinked. Mira Jane immediately released her hands from holding Urza's cheeks. Urza also quickly let go of Mira Jane's hair, quickly organized some images. Like a good girl, the two said in unison, "Welcome back, Xingchen. Chapter 68 Banquet. A carnival belonging to the family. What exactly do you want to do?" I've only been out for one day, just one day. Just let the guild do things like this. Don't you need money for maintenance? I am lawless in the guild, and I keep making trouble outside. Can't you stop for a while? Please be considerate to the old man. Inside the fairy tale guild, Makarov was standing on the bar, whining. Below the bar, people with blue noses and swollen faces stood below, silently bowed his head, listening to Makarov's reprimand. But whether or not you actually listen is another matter. For example, a bad girl from time to time, I dig my ears and look at my nails from time to time. Apparently impatient, look forward, looking at a certain armored woman who was listening carefully in front of her, she pouted in disdain. Turning his eyes again, looking at the black-haired boy sitting by the bar, a sweet smile appeared on the corner of his mouth unconsciously. Makarov seemed to be tired. He waved his hand. Forget it, I don't expect you guys to be obedient. 22. At least, try to lighten my burden a little. He took a deep breath, as if changing his mood. The next moment, the sad look on Makarov's face disappeared completely. Looking at Luo Xingchen sitting in front of the bar and Laxus leaning on the pillar, proudly smiled. The extremely fast, face-changing speed made everyone in the guild feel ashamed. Cough, cough. After a light cough, Makarov drew everyone's attention. Now, it's up to me to announce the qualified candidates for this S-level assessment. The voice fell. The people who were still dead just now became excited. Constant discussions filled the entire guild for a while. Someone passed? Who? It's really strange. It's been a long time since no one in our guild passed the S-rank assessment. Yeah, the S-class after many years. I think it should be Laxus. After all, his age is about 3 years old, so he should be stronger. Not necessarily. Xingchen's strength is obvious to all. Gee, it's amazing whoever gets through anyway. 117, 114, it's hard to imagine. Hearing the people talking, Makarov also has no intention of selling out. The tone became extremely serious. In this assessment, both Laxus and Luo Xingchen passed the assessment with excellent results. Makarov's voice fell. The scene suddenly fell into silence. 2 S-classes. Someone finally reacted and spoke with some uncertainty. No, I must have heard it right. No, what the president just said was indeed 2 S-ranks, which is amazing. 5. It seems that the younger generation has begun to show their prominence. In the crowd, Mira Jane, who had been watching Luo Xingchen, clenched her fists, whispered, S-class, I will definitely try to catch up with you. 35, on the other hand, Urza's expression was full of seriousness. The stars have become S-rank. How can I be slack as a teammate? It seems that the intensity of training is going to increase. She made up her mind inwardly. Speaking of which, Xingchen, a 14-year-old S-rank mage, seems to have broken a record, right? Macau recalled the information in his mind and said, Indeed, there is no such guild in the Fiori Kingdom where such a young S-rank has appeared. 5, the Wakabar on the side, echoed it. That's why I say the future is for the younger generation. Urza, Mira Jane, and even Natsu and Gray are not weak. Someone compared the young people in the guild. Suddenly a fact was discovered. The children in the guild are really perverted. It's 2 monsters, Gray exclaimed. S-rank mages. In that case, let's duel. Natsu jumped out excitedly. His eyes were fixed on Luo Xingchen and Laxus in front of him. The whole person was full of fighting spirit. As soon as Natsu's words came out, the audience was full of black lines. But if it's Natsu, it's also a habit. No, Luo Xingchen didn't even look at Natsu. Boring. Laxus turned his head away. Natsu was rejected unsurprisingly. But Natsu doesn't care if you agree or not. I'm up, Fire Dragon's Iron Fist. The flames climbed over him, and Natsu charged up screaming. What a troublesome guy. Luo Xingchen snapped his fingers. A crisp sound seemed to echo in Natsu's ears. Moment. The white ice crystals attached to his body at an extremely fast speed. Natsu's entire body stopped charging. Even the flames burning in his hands were frozen into flaming ice cubes. Just be quiet for a while, Luo Xingchen said softly. Also, this ice isn't too cold. After all, it's not that kind of magic. Smiling slightly, Luo Xingchen turned around when the world was quiet. I ordered a cup of milk at the bar. Enjoy it to the fullest. Well-deserved, Natsu. 55 looked at Natsu frozen. Gray suddenly smiled excitedly. Nothing makes Gray happier than Natsu being deflated. Kana did not participate in the discussion. When Luo Xingchen came back, she quietly hid behind the crowd, staring closely at Gildarts, who was laughing very happily in the crowd. Listen to Makarov's announcement just now. Her eyes are constantly flickering. 647, the stars, and Laxus. It's great, if only I were as good as that. Hands kneading the hem of the yellow dress, looking at Luo Xingchen and Laxus being surrounded. Kana is even more determined to become stronger. Well, listen to me, everyone, and to celebrate the success of Stars and Laxus, I announce 35 just when people are talking. Standing on the bar, Makarov raised a glass in his hand, shouting loudly, "We're having a party!" 35 immediately. Countless echoing voices rang out one after another. Oh, have a banquet. Have a banquet. I heard the word banquet. Countless people raised the wine glasses in their hands. With a sincere smile on his face, it was a smile called blessing for the two newly promoted S-rank mages. For this group of wizards, either sad or happy, there is no trouble that a banquet cannot solve. Banquets are always the best choice for everyone to express their emotions. Also only at Fairy Tale to feel this warm atmosphere. For a group of homeless children, such an atmosphere is called the taste of home. This is no longer just a carnival for mages. It is also a carnival for the family. Chapter 69, Dragon Egg Boom. With a loud bang, the door of Fairy Tale was kicked open. We're back. 99, Mira Jane's voice came through the door. Welcome back, Sister Mila. Watching his sister return, Lee Sena immediately greeted with a smile. Really, can't you just open the door properly? Damn, Mila. 35, Mira Jane has yet to respond to Lee Sena. Urza's slightly unhappy voice came from behind. Huh, am I getting in your way? Rigid Urza? 27, Mira Jane put his hands on his hips. He turned his head to look at Urza behind him. Since you are a member of the guild, you are obliged to take care of the various facilities of the guild. 5. Urza stopped in front of Mira Jane. Dangerous eyes stared at Mira Jane in front of her. What if I don't? Mira Jane narrowed her eyes. Want to fight? Urza clenched his fists. Just in time. I haven't asked you to settle the account for you stealing the limelight at work. Mira Jane said through gritted teeth. Doesn't that just prove that you are weaker than me? Urza was not to be outdone. The two equal parts actually burst out from both of them at the same time. Constant collision in the air, despite looking at each other. But the corners of both of their mouths showed a very terrifying smile. The wind blowing through the gate sounded the horn of battle. Mira Jane, Urza boom! The two white and tender fists collided at this moment. Brings a little airflow. Hard, stinky woman. Mira Jane kicks Urza away. Smelly woman with a belly button. Urza shot back immediately, knocking Mira Jane into the air. Boom! The two bumped their heads against each other and pushed each other with their hands. The two very beautiful faces showed a strange look. Cold woman, skinny woman, fat pig, glasses. 5. Neither of the two let the other. For a time, the gate of the guild directly became a battlefield for the two of them. Lisana, Gray, and Kana at the opposite bar were covered in black lines. By the way, are you going to fight just after you get back? Lisana didn't know what to say anymore. The level is really low. Hearing the trash talk from the two of them, Kana muttered silently. That guy Urza, he's already like that. And he dares to tell us not to fight. He's really mad. Gray was sweating coldly. By the way, what about Brother Xingchen? Watching only Urza and Mira Jane. Did not see Luo Xingchen. Lisana looked back with some doubts. Sure enough, I saw the figure of the black-haired boy. With his hands in his pockets, Luo Xingchen, who was walking at the back, sighed slightly. Turning sideways, leaning against the gate of the guild, moved into the guild from the edge of the battle between the two. Brother Xingchen, welcome back. Looking at Luo Xingchen, who was approaching, Lisana showed a sweet smile. Yo, Lisana, I'm back. Luo Xingchen greeted. How's the mission going? Kana asked aloud. That's an S-rank mission. 35 Gray was obviously a little excited, his eyes fixed on Luo Xingchen. Luo Xingchen came to several people. As usual, I ordered a glass of milk at the bar. Then he raised his head slightly, as if caught in a memory. Well, to a certain extent, it's still a success. Somehow, Lisa was a little puzzled. I took a sip of the milk handed by the waiter, put the cup on the table. Luo Xingchen sighed and said, "The task is successfully completed, but almost all the rewards have been deducted." As he spoke, his eyes turned to Urza Mira Jane, who was still fighting. Who made these two fight in the client's villa? And the result? Here Luo Xingchen's remarks. Lisana, Kana, and Gray on the side can almost imagine that scene. Isn't it hurting the client? Gray guessed. Luo Xingchen shook his head expressionlessly. Said, as a result, someone else's villa was completely demolished. Look at the mouths of the three big bosses. Luo Xingchen nodded again. Well, a villa worth tens of millions of J. No way. I remember that Brother Xingchen's mission this time seems to be only 4 million J. How did you guys leave safely? Lisana looked at Luo Xingchen in disbelief. Fortunately, the client of the task has a good personality. Since we really helped him solve the trouble, we only charged some maintenance fees in a symbolic way. Having said that, Luo Xingchen paused. Then he continued, but it doesn't matter, it's just the first time to experience an S-level mission. Take it as a learning experience. 35 looking at the two who were fighting farther and farther. To be honest, Luo Xingchen has some regrets now. Regret bringing these two completely discordant people on a mission together. However, if you think about it carefully, it doesn't seem to have brought it on his own initiative. A few days ago, Luo Xingchen passed the S-level examination. I plan to try the legendary S-level mission. Urza is from the same team, so naturally he should bring it. However, this news was spread out without knowing how, also known by Mira Jane. Maybe it's because he doesn't like Urza's ability to perform S-class missions. So Mira Jane found Luo Xingchen and put forward a request to join the team. Luo Xingchen didn't feel any trouble at that time. Sometimes one more person is more powerful. What's more, Mira Jane is very strong. So Luo Xingchen agreed. The result is now. Along the way, the two were either quarreling or fighting. Even in just 3 days, Luo Xingchen was forced to get used to their bickering. Just when a few people were chatting, Natsu ran in excitedly holding an egg about the size of the others. He shouted, "Everyone look, I found an egg." Egg. Makarov looked at the huge object Natsu was holding. How can you have such a thing? He looked at Natsu and asked, "East Forest, I picked it up in the East Forest." It's rare. Gray, who was naked to the side, suddenly interjected. It is even rarer not to mock Natsu. Natsu, Wang Ma Zhao, will be so considerate sometimes. Do you want to share it with everyone? He said with a smile. Gray clothes. 35 Kana sighed and reminded. What? He began to look for the clothes that he didn't know when to throw away. Natsu moved the egg he was holding away from Gray and retorted loudly. What a joke. This is a dragon egg. I want to hatch him. 35 dragon egg. Kana and Gray walked forward in confusion. Natsu put the egg on the ground. Interestedly, he pointed to the blue pattern on the egg. Said, look, the patterns here are like dragon claws, 9. Maybe this is Igneal's egg. Natsu is full of confidence. Really? Gray and Kana watched the egg carefully. What a fool this guy is. 55 Luo Xingchen on the side shook his head helplessly. However, it is precisely because of this that Natsu is Natsu. Never for a moment forget the dragon who raised his own. Chapter 70, A Firm Heart. So, old man, please let the dragon eggs hatch. Natsu put his hands on his hips and looked at Makarov eagerly. What are you talking about, idiot? Without hesitation, Makarov tapped Natsu's head with his cane. Then he looked at Natsu seriously. There is no magic in this world that can desecrate life like this. Life is the crystallization of love, and no magic can overcome love. Natsu put his hands on the top of his head. He stared blankly at Makarov, his eyes filled with confusion. What the hell are you talking about? I don't understand at all. Natsu thought for a while, but still didn't understand Makarov's words. Upon seeing this, Makarov sighed helplessly. Sure enough, the little devil still doesn't understand this kind of thing. Just then, because of the egg that Natsu brought back. The curious Urza and Mira Jane also chose a temporary truce. Come over. Looking at Natsu's confused face, Mira Jane put her arms around her and said, in other words, if you want it to hatch, you have to work hard on your own, which is stupid, Natsu. Urza, on the side, added, although I don't really want to agree with this woman's words, it is true. Exactly. You kid usually only knows how to destroy things. So take advantage of this opportunity to learn how life is born. The birth of life, Natsu murmured. Then he raised his head, looked at the crowd, and asked, but how exactly? Warm. Luo Xingchen, who was sitting at the bar, said, for an egg, the right temperature will help it hatch. Temperature? Listening to Luo Xingchen's words, Natsu was thoughtful. An excited smile gradually rose up the corners of his mouth. Gray, who knew Natsu so well, suddenly had a bad feeling. Hey, did you hear what Xingchen said? He looked at Natsu and asked. Of course, Natsu responded. I'm the best at things like temperature. When the voice fell, Natsu directly picked up the egg. Flames shot out of his mouth, swept the entire eggshell. One idiot. Urza punched Natsu in the head. Then hold the egg and place it on the mat. Ha ha ha, Natsu. Do you think this egg is cooked? Mira Jane burst out laughing. Mira, don't be rude. Urza interrupted Mira Jane's laughter. But what should I do? Natsu scratched his head. At this time, I can use my magic. Lisana walked over confidently. Looking at Natsu, Lisana's face raised an interested smile, asked softly, hey, Natsu, may I join the hatching of this egg? Oh, are you going to help me with this? Natsu suddenly became excited. Lisana smiled and nodded. Because I thought it would be fun to hatch this egg. Saying that, Lisana raised her right hand. A mauve-red magic circle spread out in her hands. Take over animal soul. In the blink of an eye, Lisana's body turned into a big bird with blue feathers. Oh, Natsu exclaimed. So that's how it is. Gray nodded knowingly. However, in the guild, it seems to take up too much space. Lisana is more thoughtful. If that's the case, just go outside the guild, Natsu said and picked up the egg. At this time, Gray also stepped forward. It's better that I accompany you, otherwise, with the thick lines of Natsu, it is a question whether this egg can survive. 99. If that's the case, then take me with you. 35. Kana, who had her hands behind her back, also said with a smile. Seeing that everyone is willing to help themselves, Natsu's smile also grew brighter. Thank you, everyone. Natsu thanked excitedly. But he suddenly turned his eyes to Luo Xingchen at the bar. Luo Xingchen stopped when he was halfway through drinking milk. He looked at Natsu in confusion. CCBB. Xingchen, I would like to invite you to help hatch the eggs. You know a lot. Natsu gave the invitation with a smile. Puff. Suddenly, the milky white milk was sprayed out by Luo Xingchen. He just heard something. After 2 lifetimes, he was actually invited to be with the children, just to lay eggs. Xingchen, are you going to hatch eggs too? Not far away, Makarov's teasing voice came. After all, in the guild, no matter how childish things Natsu and the others do, Makarov can understand. But Luo Xingchen's style of doing things has always been something. In addition to drinking milk, it's hard to associate it with his age. Therefore, Makarov could not imagine what Luo Xingchen would look like hatching an egg. Are the stars going to hatch eggs? Mira Jane looked at Luo Xingchen with great interest. Such a picture. Her little face seemed to turn red. I don't know what's going on in my mind. He covered his cheeks with his hands. It seems so cute. 33. Urza nodded, pursing her lips. This time, I agree with Myra's words. Luo Xingchen, 66.99 in the eyes of everyone. Luo Xingchen still waved his hand. I won't participate in this kind of thing. You should go together. 55. Isn't the stars coming? Natsu seemed a little lost. This is your test, Natsu. Having said that, Luo Xingchen turned around, obviously not wanting to worry about this issue. Allah, what a pity. 35. Mira Jane sighed. It was originally planned that if Xingchen goes, I will also go to see it. Saying that, Mira Jane waved her hand indifferently. Left here. Urza slapped Natsu on the shoulder. Come on. Then he turned to leave, although Luo Xingchen was not invited. But there are a lot of people, so Natsu beckoned his friends toward the outside of the guild. run away hurriedly. Children's innocence is really beautiful. Looking at the few people who left, Luo Xingchen murmured softly. He seemed to notice the depressed elfman. Luo Xingchen asked aloud, "What's the matter? Don't you go with them?" Elfman shook his head slightly. Looking at the juice in front of him, he said softly, "Even Lisana can use the magic received by her whole body. Why can't I?" The more he spoke, the deeper Elfman's tone became. Obviously, the magic we learned together. Magic is the embodiment of the mind. If you want to use magic freely and completely, the most important thing is to have a firm heart. Looking at Elfman, Luo Xingchen spoke slowly. "So work hard." He got up and patted Elfman on the shoulder. Luo Xingchen left here. "Solid heart," Elfman murmured. Chapter 71, The Birth. Dragons happy. 3 days passed quietly. Inside the lively fairy tale guild. After returning from the mission, Laxus looked at Luo Xingchen in front of him in surprise. "You mean dragon eggs?" Then he shook his head. "How could there be such a thing?" "Well, wasn't Natsu also raised by dragons?" Luo Xingchen asked rhetorically. "You believe it?" Laxus looked at Luo Xingchen suspiciously. "Why don't you believe it?" Luo Xingchen replied. Laxus shrugged indifferently. "Whatever, it's boring anyway." 99. He looked at Luo Xingchen with his hands in his pockets. Eyes straightened. To say, in the whole guild, I am afraid that only Luo Xingchen can chat with him. By the way, you seem to be very busy recently. After becoming S-rank, I have completed nearly 10 S-rank missions. You seem to be the only one. His brows wrinkled. I've been getting stronger. 35. Really, back to the topic again. Luo Xingchen sighed helplessly and said, "I'm also planning to go on a mission recently." 39. Laxus nodded. "Anyway, don't be left behind by me. You should think about how to catch up first." Having said that, Luo Xingchen looked Laxus up and down. "By the way, don't you want to leave right away? This time, I'm going to take a day off." Laxus replied. "Then let's have a drink." 35. It's so boring. Just the two of us. What are you, Tsundere? So, what's the matter with me drinking and drinking milk? Just when Luo Xingchen and Laxus were chatting with each other, the door was shoved open by Natsu. "Who is it? Who stole my eggs?" Natsu rushed in anxiously and shouted at the crowd. "The egg is gone," Gray said in surprise. "Didn't you keep the eggs when we left yesterday?" Kana looked puzzled. "Laxus, is that you?" Natsu ran up to Laxus. "I'm not interested." Laxus shook his head. "Where's the stars?" Natsu turned to look at Luo Xingchen again. "Do you think it's possible?" Luo Xingchen, who was holding a milk glass, asked rhetorically. "Urza, spit it out for me." Natsu found Urza aggressively. "Hey, you're going too far." Urza was eating cake with black lines all over his head. "Sister Mila, did you know?" Lisana asked her sister. Sister Mila folded her arms, leaned on the chair, and pouted. "I know that." After speaking, she looked at Natsu again and joked. "Natsu, could it be that you ate the egg yourself?" 35. What did you say? Natsu ran towards Mira Jane. "Do you want to fight?" Mira Jane slapped the table and stood up. "I'm not Urza. I'll be merciful." Urza, who saw this scene, immediately went to persuade him. "It's fighting again." Macau, who was sitting at the bar drinking with Makarov and Waka, sighed. "What bunch of messed up rats." Wakaba smiled and continued. "I can't imagine what the guild will look like after many years." Makarov said, "Don't worry. There will be quarrels with each other, which means they identify with each other." 39. Didn't you see the lightness written on their faces? It's so boring. Laxus leaned back in his chair. "Close your eyes. My opinion is the exact opposite of yours. It's the loud ones that are fun." Luo Xingchen watched Natsu's direction. Natsu, who was pulled away, sat down on the ground in frustration. "Where did my egg go?" "Don't cry, Natsu. I'll forgive you for trying to fight me just now," Mira Jane said. "I didn't cry." Natsu retorted with tears in his eyes. "Mira, stop adding fuel to the fire." Urza frowned. Then he looked at Natsu. "Natsu, don't cry too." I said, "I'm not crying." Natsu was out of breath. "Hey, you better hurry up and return the egg to Natsu." Urza looked at Mira Jane as if she thought she took it. "It said that I didn't take it. I think it was you. Did it eat it?" Mira Jane didn't show weakness and responded to the past. What did you say? Damn it, guy. Lisan on the side had no time to pay attention to Urza and Mirajane's growing bickering. The loss of the egg made her tears spin. Egg, where did the egg go? He raised his arms and wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. Natsu, Lisana, and everyone, I'm sorry. Just then, a voice came from the door. Elfman walked in with the egg. So you took it, Elfman? Natsu immediately looked in Elfman's direction. There was a roar. Dragon egg, Lisana said, in surprise. It's like this. I think it was so cold last night, Natsu. You fell asleep and didn't care about your life. Also, I won't take it with my whole body. So, I took the eggs back and kept them warm. Elfman explained. So, it is, Elfman, you are a man? 99 Natsu excitedly took the egg from Elfman's hand. You really doubted me just now, didn't you? Mira Jane skimmed Urza. Dare to say this. Don't you still feel the same? Not to be outdone, Urza responded. Really, the eggs have been found. Why are these two still able to fight? Luo Xingchen shook his head. Fortunately, the quarrel between the two was interrupted by the sudden sound of breaking. The egg in Natsu's arms suddenly moved. Then cracks started to appear on the eggshell. Egg. Natsu's eyes were full of surprise. Put the egg on the ground, watching the cracks expand. Are you going to give birth? Gray said. It's not really a dragon, is it? Mirajane and Urza also stopped fighting. Laxus opened his eyes. His eyes glanced in Natsu's direction. Click for a time, under the gaze of everyone in the guild. The eggshell was completely shattered, and a cloud of blue light flew out of the egg. Shine above the guild. What exactly is it? Everyone in the guild was very curious. Next moment, the light dissipated and the blue kitten was revealed. Small wings behind it seemed to support its flight. Cat! The crowd dropped their jaws in shock. The wings behind the blue kitten are constantly waving. It flew over everyone's heads from time to time with it. The blue cat seems tired from flying. He found Natsu's head in the crowd and fell down. The little wings behind him also disappeared. Love! The kitten sat up, made a milky cry. So cute. Immediately, most of the people in the guild had red hearts. He cried out involuntarily. Kitten. Luo Xingchen smiled slightly. Everyone in the guild stepped forward, obviously very curious about this kitten. Natsu, look at you. Lisana pointed at everyone in the guild. Everyone is very happy now. It's clear that they've all been in a group just now. She looked at the blue cat and said softly, it's like a bluebird that can bring happiness. 99 happy. Natsu looked at the kitten in his hand. Then call it happy. Love. The kitten's ears moved, seemingly satisfied with the name. Raised his little paw and attached to Natsu. It's the son of the dragon, Happy. Natsu jumped up and down with Happy in his arms. Not far away, Lee Daesu held a paintbrush and kept swimming on the drawing board in front of him. Natsu and Lisana, who were very happy with the birth of Happy. Gray and Kana were equally excited. Urza and Mirajane slung over shoulders. Luo Xingchen and Laxus in front of the table and chairs. And everyone in the guild with happy smiles. Just draw it as a dragon. Lee Daesu murmured softly. Happy, originally held by Natsu. It was drawn as a blue dragon. And Natsu rides on the dragon with a very bright smile on his face. B. Chapter 72, the book, named Memories of Time, a few days after the birth of Happy, a symbol or happiness. The guild returned to its usual noisy appearance. Inside the guild's basement, Levy looked at Luo Xingchen in front of him and bowed slightly. Brother Xingchen, thank you very much. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't solve this problem. It's just a little effort. You don't need to care. 99 Luo Xingchen waved his hand. The reason for this was because Levy encountered a problem with an ancient text while reading a book. I originally planned to go to the underground library to find information, but I met Luo Xingchen, who happened to be reading books here. Luo Xingchen, who knew the library well, also helped Levy find the materials she was looking for. So there was this scene. As for why Luo Xingchen is here, of course, in order to understand the various magics of the entire magic world. Although it has a magic sublimer, it can directly borrow the power of the 647 magic crystal badge to fight. However, strength is strength. Even in great power, if you connect the characteristics of power or if you don't know the advantages and disadvantages. That doesn't make much difference either. Moreover, as Luo Xingchen, who was able to get close to the institution of higher learning through his own efforts in the previous life, IQ is not low at all. Therefore, it is easy to understand the magical properties recorded in the books. It's just that there are too many books in Fairy Tale's library. Even after all these years, Luo Xingchen frequents here, but it is still a long way from understanding all the magic collected here. Anyway, I still have to thank Brother Xingchen. Since the information has been found, then I will leave first. After Levi thanked again, he proposed to leave first. Wait for me, I'm ready to go. Having said that, Luo Xingchen closed the complete set of flame magic in his hand. He turned around and climbed up the ladder beside the bookshelf and placed it on the high bookshelf. He was ready to leave with Levi. However, his eyes were fixed on a book in the corner of the bookshelf, obviously in the most inconspicuous corner. However, it was set up with sealing magic because of itself, and obviously different. Memories of Time, Luo Xingchen murmured while looking at the book. The book Luo Xingchen asked Makarov why it was sealed here. Makarov explained this. Because of its own unimaginable ability. An unauthorized use will have serious consequences. Therefore, Makarov used sealing magic to permanently seal it in the corner of Fairy Tale's library. And the reason why it attracted Luo Xingchen's attention, just because of the effect of the seal, seems to be due to a bit of time. And weakened. It seems that I still have to talk to the president when I have time. Shaking his head, Luo Xingchen climbed down the ladder, left the library with Levi. Xingchen, I finally found you, let's fight. Just went up. Natsu found Luo Xingchen's trail. Immediately, he rushed over excitedly, shouting that he was going to fight Luo Xingchen. Let's duel. The young Happy waved his small wings, floating up and down in the air, echoing Natsu's words. Not far away, Elfman holding the book side. He's here again. How many times has it been? What a bad boy. 95 Mira Jane, who was sitting on the side with one hand on her chin, smiled in agreement. I don't know if it was funny to see Natsu's provocation. It's because you're happy to see someone. Urza on the side nodded in relief. However, after failing so many times, you can still challenge bravely. This courage is to be commended. 99. Did you hear that? Mira Jane looked at Elfman beside him. She actually said, this courage is worth commending. Mira Jane imitated Urza's words. Then he curled his lips in disdain. Who do you think you are? 35 immediately. Elfman buried his head in the standing book as fast as he could. The whole person shivered because of the bloody storm that was about to set off. Next moment, the two girls, gnashing their teeth, pressed their heads against their heads. Eyes are constantly meeting in the air, rubbing out scarlet electric light. Smelly woman, if you have anything to say, just say it directly, and don't betray me. Urza snapped. Don't put on a very mature look. Be careful, I flatter you. Armor girl. Not to be outdone, Mira Jane responded. On the other side, Luo Xingchen didn't notice the two who were pinching again, looking helplessly at Natsu. Natsu, I'm very busy. You go to Gray. Saying that, he didn't intend to ignore Natsu. He walked forward on his own. Don't ignore me. Fire Dragon's Claw. Claws. Looking at Luo Xingchen's back, Natsu immediately took a step forward. Happy, milky voice echoed behind him. Flames burned under Natsu's feet, and he kicked Luo Xingchen. Really? Luo Xingchen stopped, clenched his fists, and turned around. Then swing out. Boom dash. Natsu directly broke through the ceiling of the guild and flew out towards the outside world. Natsu, Happy, stared blankly at Natsu's disappearing figure. Ayla, Xingchen, my ceiling. Makarov's distressed voice came from ahead. 10,000 J. Luo Xingchen pointed out a finger. Hey, isn't it the ceiling? What does it count? Makarov's painful expression instantly turned into an ugly smile. Sure enough, this is the only way to deal with the president. Luo Xingchen shook his head. However, Xingchen, occasionally you should stop and look at the people behind you. 5-something seemed to come to mind, Makarov said softly. Huh? Luo Xingchen looked at Makarov. The children of the guild are growing, fast or slow, but they are still moving forward, Makarov said after taking a sip of wine. Too blindly in one's own world is not a sign of progress. Luo Xingchen was stunned. Indeed, among the younger generation of the guild. Because I have always been the strongest 1.1. Thus, he seems to have begun to ignore the progress of others. If you don't know the crisis that the people in the back are chasing after, so even if it stands on the peak, it is also possible to be pulled down the cliff. Smiling slightly, Luo Xingchen nodded. I understand, President. Saying that, he walked towards the door. I just feel like I forgot something. Looking at the direction of Luo Xingchen's departure, Mira Jane, who was fighting Urza, called the fight off. Despite the fight, but the conversation between Luo Xingchen and the two just heard clearly. Naturally, he knew what Luo Xingchen wanted to do. Let's go take a look together. The stars seem to be interesting. It's an interesting idea. Urza agreed with Mira Jane. The two hit it off, immediately let go of the other party, and ran towards the outside of the guild. Chapter 73, The Future Person Who Crosses the Torrent of Time. On the beach outside the back door of the guild, Luo Xingchen and Natsu are facing each other. Come on, Natsu, Luo Xingchen said. On the opposite side, Luo Xingchen officially accepted a challenge. Natsu is clearly in a state of extreme excitement. Very good. I've become a lot stronger, I'll show you this time. Natsu clenched his fists, the flames burning in his hands. He ran towards Luo Xingchen quickly. Natsu's speed is not that fast. Even the intent of the attack was so obvious. The raised arm slammed down suddenly. Natsu fell directly into the sand. Not discouraged, Natsu got up again with his hands on the ground. Fire dragons, iron fist, accompanied by a roar. Natsu attacked Luo Xingchen's chin again. Boom! Another horizontal punch smashed Natsu several dozen meters away. It's not over yet. Natsu yelled and continued to attack Luo Xingchen. Fire Dragon's sword horn. Luo Xingchen raised his hand and grabbed Natsu's head. This blow, even Luo Xingchen felt a little force. Very good. Luo Xingchen threw it away again. The heads of the people watching the battle from time to time swayed from time to time, obviously watching the one who keeps attacking. Natsu, who keeps getting knocked up again. Damn it. 22 Natsu, who was thrown away at random, gritted his teeth. Until now, Natsu has not even seen Luo Xingchen's magic. Yes, that's right. The battle continues to this day. Luo Xingchen was still just dealing with Natsu with his fists and feet. What's the matter? Is this the only thing you can do? Looking at Natsu at the moment, Luo Xingchen spoke flatly. Not at all. Natsu yelled. Next is all my strength. The voice fell, and Natsu took a deep breath, the magic power gathering in his mouth. Fire dragons roar. The flames that roared out formed a pillar of fire that was not large. But compared to the previous scale, it is indeed much bigger. You really have grown up. Natsu. Luo Xingchen slowly stretched out his hand. The cold air began to fill his hands. Next moment, the roaring flame touched Luo Xingchen's palm. The cold burst out. Even Urza and the others who were watching the game from the sidelines felt the crazy temperature drop. Immediately after, Natsu's roaring flames stopped in midair. It was then frozen into ice in the same shape as Natsu's flames. The ice cubes are spreading like crazy. Along the flames, it clings to Natsu's body with wide-eyed eyes. Just for a moment, Natsu's entire body turned into an ice sculpture shimmering in the sun. Standing on the beach, snapped. Luo Xingchen snapped his fingers. The ice that wrapped Natsu collapsed and disappeared into magic molecules. Natsu groaned, kneeling down on the beach. Desperate disparity. This made Natsu look unwilling. Obviously, there is not much difference in age, but this person in front of him has a strength that is different from his own. However, although the gap is desperate, although the heart is full of unwillingness, but with Natsu's character, he won't give up because of this. On the contrary, it will also use this to urge yourself to move forward. Falling on the ground, he slowly stretched out his hand and pointed to the sky. The final murmur. One day I will definitely defeat you, although you say it's so cool. The truth is so embarrassing. Happy flying in midair complained. One day, Natsu was still mumbling. Looking at Natsu in front of him, Luo Xingchen smiled slightly, responded, "Ah, I'm waiting for you. I have been looking forward to the day when you can become stronger." The next day, after yesterday's beating, Natsu spent some time at home recovering from his injuries. So that, yesterday afternoon, the atmosphere of the entire guild has more than doubled. This can't help but make people sigh that the world is much cleaner, and rant about Natsu's shit stir. However, all this after Natsu recovered the next day. Change back again. Early morning, Natsu and Gray just got into it for some inconspicuous little thing. Should it be said that he has courage, or that he is just a muscle? Luo Xingchen at the bar shook his head helplessly when he saw Urza walking towards the two men aggressively. Luo Xingchen immediately understood that they were going to be out of luck. Sure enough, Urza said nothing. One person gave a punch, forcibly stopping the fight. He looked at the two with serious eyes. "You, come out to me." After speaking, he walked out of the guild without looking back. "What?" Natsu gritted his teeth. "It's so arrogant. I can't stand it anymore." 35 Gray clenched his fists tightly. Seems to have the same goal. The two stopped fighting for a while. The same enemy followed Urza and walked out. But obviously, the two of them didn't think about their ending. "Is this the first time?" Li Sana, who was sitting next to Luo Xingchen, sighed helplessly. "Love, this is Natsu and Gray." Happy, on the side, said, while holding the small dried fish. "Brother Xingchen, do you want to take a look?" Li Sana looked at Luo Xingchen and asked. "Forget it. There are 800 plays a day, so there's nothing to see." Luo Xingchen replied, outside the guild gate. Urza put his arms around his arms and looked at the two behind him. "Come on together. I'm enough alone." Natsu burst into confidence. "That's what I'm going to say." Gray yelled, dazed with anger, said that the two were not in charge of each other. They took their steps and rushed towards Urza. Immediately after, bang, 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 a series of crisp, knocking sounds directly let Natsu and Gray lie on the ground. Urza folded his arms and looked down at the two of them. Fell silent. Not far away, behind a pile of boxes she hadn't noticed. "For people and one cat are hiding here." He quietly observed the Urza people in front of him. What's going on?" 35 in the crowd. The girls with blonde hair, blue and white sleeveless tops, and blue pleated skirts covered their mouths in surprise. "Come on, just kidding." Another black-haired boy with a naked upper body trembled. "I was beaten so easily." A drop of cold sweat ran across the forehead of the Sakura-haired boy. "Is this Urza, Natsu, and Gray from childhood?" The blonde-haired girl murmured. Beside her, the blue cat with outstretched wings stared blankly at the few people in front of her. Could it be that we have returned to the world of the past? The blue cat said this fact in horror. Suddenly, the other four made disbelieving voices. "This is the world of the past." The blonde girl's tone was very surprised. "What should I do? I need to organize my thoughts." But just as she was thinking, the two boys on the side, but she exclaimed at another girl with long crimson hair, "Hey, what did you do to me as a kid?" "Urza, looks like you've been substituted into your childhood." "Natsu and Gray?" the blonde girl complained. Yes, hiding behind the box, it was Natsu, Gray, Urza Happy, who grew up at a girl named Lucy. For unknown reasons, they traveled through the torrent of time. Came this era. That is, they come from the future. Chapter 74 Time Paradox in this moment. Adult Urza, who was questioned by adult Natsu and adult Gray, was watching the scene ahead. There was a gleam in her eyes. The tone was full of nostalgia. "I remember this day." Adult Urza watched as Natsu and Gray were beaten to the ground by their younger self, whispered softly, "Stand up, quickly stand up." "Back then, when I was a kid, I would say this." Here, Urza whispered softly. Natsu and Gray on the side seemed to understand Urza's good intentions, although they don't remember it anymore. But it didn't affect their equally nostalgic expressions. And that little bit of emotion now, as a child, Urza looked at the two who fell to the ground, finally broke the silence that had been kept. No mercy at all. Urza kicked Natsu and Gray directly into the air. Stand up for me." Urza's tone was unusually fierce. His expression was full of anger. It feels completely different. Behind a box, adult Natsu and adult Gray retorted loudly. Adult Urza wrapped her arms around her. There was silence for a while. Who was the one who stole my cake? 35 young Urza aggressively pursued Natsu and Gray, who were running away. It's not me. Natsu fled frantically. It's Natsu, Gray said loudly. It's Gray. Natsu replied angrily. That's the cake that Xingchen bought for me, bastards. Urza is still in hot pursuit. We really don't know, the two said in unison. He, looking at the chase in front of him, the blonde Lucy smiled slightly and said softly, You were so cute when you were little. The adult Natsu crouched behind the box complained. Urza was so violent when he was young. The adult Gray on the side nodded. Have you forgotten? Run, Natsu, the grown-up, happy, cheered loudly. Now is not the time to speak nasty things. We must find a way to return to the original world. The grown-up Urza folded his arms and spoke seriously. What's the matter? It seems very interesting. Let's watch it for a while. Natsu on the side didn't take it seriously and watched the scene in front of him with interest. Good idea. Gray nodded in agreement. Are you all idiots? Urza glared at both of them. Then he looked at everyone. Don't you know the time paradox? Time paradox? Happy was a little puzzled. Lucy raised his hand. I've seen it in books. Then he touched his chin with one hand and said in a deep voice, The past will affect the present and the future. If something is done in the past, it has the potential to change assumptions about the future. Urza nodded and said, If this really is the past, what we do here could change the future and even history. Saying that, she looked to the side abruptly. Do you understand? Natsu and Gray. However, no one responded to her, except for herself and Lucy beside her. It's empty. It's gone. Lucy hugged his head in horror. By the way, even Happy. What? Urza froze in place. The corners of his eyes kept twitching. Those guys. After a while, Urza, who had been holding back for a long time, finally broke out. I didn't expect them to be so stupid. So scary. Facing the angry Urza, the blonde Lucy hugged herself in horror and hid in the corner. Urza pointed at Lucy with one hand and a book in the other. Ordered to Lucy, Lucy, you go get Natsu and Gray back. I'll stay here to decipher this book. Yes, I went. Lucy's head nods like a rattle. Cowardly. He wanted to leave first. Wait a minute. Suddenly, Urza grabbed the back of Lucy's neck. You'll have to dress up. Urza's tone couldn't be denied. A utility room. Lucy, who looked at the red bunny decoration on his body, twitched the corners of his mouth. Well, then no one will find out it's Lucy. 35 Urza on the opposite side nodded in satisfaction. It's more conspicuous. Lucy groaned. Suddenly, she saw the white cat costume that Urza was wearing. He also has cat ears on his head, and the white tail behind him seems to come alive, swaying in the air. Cat, Lucy exclaimed. Urza put her hands on her hips and seemed satisfied with her outfit, nodding proudly. Yes, same Lucy. 66.95. The contrast was so great that it took Lucy a while to recover. Looking at Urza, asked, By the way, I'm not in fairy tale in this era, so it shouldn't be necessary, right? But one day we will meet, so be careful, Urza explained. Lucy nodded resignedly. But look at the pair of bunny ears on top of his head. And more open clothes have some openings that don't pinch. Isn't there any more normal clothes? Speaking of this, Urza sighed slightly. I don't know if it's because of the different times. My dressing room is a little unstable, so I can only take out these two sets. Then she looked at Lucy. Are you going to change the cat's clothes? Lucy shrugged the two ears on top of his head and said, I still want to change to the original one. Sorry, I lost it. Inside fairy tale. Wearing a bunny girl costume, Lucy tiptoed into the guild. He looked around with curiosity. At this time, most of the people in the guild gathered together. A dancer named Errol is dancing on the stage, attracted the hot attention of a large number of people. Boom on a table. Macau slapped the wine glass on the table heavily. In a serious tone, he said, I've decided. Decide what? Wakaba on the side was puzzled. Lucy looked into the eyes of the two and revealed, Wang Li's novelty. It's Macau and Waka, so young. Macau took another sip of wine and became courageous. As if completely determined, he exclaimed, "I've decided to ask Errol to confess." What? Wakaba was shocked. "You should give up? Errol has many people who like her." "No, I have a chance." Macau's tone was firm. Boom! But the next moment, the two were directly pressed on the table. Mira Jane stepped on the backs of the two with a confident smile on her face. "The odds are mine, too. Odds to beat Urza." Her aggressive eyes kept scanning the surroundings. But where did Urza go? At the gate, Lucy watched Mira Jane's back. "Mira, 5 sure enough since childhood, this character." As she spoke, she shook her head with fear in her eyes. It seems to recall some terrifying experience. Chapter 75, Bunny Girl and Cat Girl, after getting rid of the distracting thoughts in your mind. Lucy put his eyes in front of Mira Jane again, on 2 other children with the same hair color. Then next to her are Lee Senna and Elfman. 35? Just now, she went after Natsu and Gray. Elfman said to Mira Jane. "What?" Mira Jane frowned, seemed a little unhappy. "It's rare that I even stole her cake and wanted to annoy her." Lee Senna was stunned, then said, "Sister Mira is too much." "What?" "It was a cake from Xingchen, although I just happened to meet it. I bought an extra one." 35. However, how can you cheapen that girl in armor? Mira Jane pouted in disdain, as if recalling the deliciousness of a cake. He couldn't help but smile. "By the way, how did Sister Mila know so clearly?" Lisanna asked. Speaking of this, Mira Jane seemed a little guilty. He waved his hand and said, "Anyway, since she ran away, the winner of this game is mine." "Competition?" Lisanna asked in confusion. "Sister, stop fighting." Elfman seemed to want to dissuade his sister. "Yeah," Lisanna agreed. "Brother Xingchen may not like it." Mira Jane's small face was instantly dyed red. 650 quickly jumped off the backs of Macau and Wakaba, who were already unconscious. There is some lack of confidence in the tone. "Well, it's just a joke." As he spoke, he glanced at Luo Xingchen at the bar from time to time. Not far away, Lucy also heard a few people's conversations. Look at the bar. The lazy boy was sitting back on the chair in front of the stage. His hands rested on the edge of the bar behind him. A book covered the boy's face, as if taking a nap. Is this the star of childhood? What's wrong with looking a little cute? Saying that, she couldn't help but smile. Then he looked in other directions. It seems that he wants to take this guild member who he has never seen before. Observe it all. Kana and Levy have an argument over chess. Ladesu, who is still very thin, leaning on the railing, complaining about Laxus being too boring. It was discussed to find Jet and Doria, who formed a team with Levy. These pictures seemed to be firmly remembered in Lucy's mind. There was a smile on her mouth, happy to enjoy this moment. Suddenly, Lucy thought of Urza's advice. Immediately got out of this state. No, now is not the time to be in a daze. 99, CCBB. Her gaze looked elsewhere again. Now we have to hurry to find Natsu and Gray and Happy. 95, she thought to herself. Yo, it's a bunny girl. 35, although an old but revealing a little wretched voice sounded behind Lucy. Oops. Lucy's body instantly stiffened in place. Makarov's voice immediately attracted the attention of most people. Suddenly, a series of voices rang out immediately. Little rabbit, let's play together. Little sister, where are you from? Are you here to entrust? This, what should I do now? Lucy looked at the eyes cast around him in horror. The heart seemed to be howling and crying. I'm going to get killed by Urza? It will definitely be. What are you doing standing at the door? Come inside, it's fun here. Makarov grabbed Lucy's hand and ran towards the middle of the guild. Hey, wait. Lucy's rebuttal words hadn't come out yet. It has already been pulled into the crowd of the guild. Immediately, Lucy wearing a bunny girl was welcomed by most people. Even Luo Xingchen at the bar was woken up by the sound. He took the book off his face. His eyes turned to the center of the crowd, but he was stunned for a moment. Looking at the blonde girl, Lucy's name appeared in Luo Xingchen's mind in an instant. After all, he is the protagonist of Fairy Tale. Luo Xingchen still has a big image. Hey, how long has it been now that Lucy is actually here and still look like an adult? But soon Luo Xingchen realized something was wrong. The magic power on Lucy is not weak. For him who uses devouring magic, it can be said that his sensitivity to magic power surpasses that of most mages. And the magic of this Lucy, it is no exaggeration to say that it is already close to the boundaries of the S-class. This also means this Lucy is definitely not the Lucy of this era. That is to say, she is from the future. Luo Xingchen responded in just a moment. Even Urza? 35, he noticed that the clothes on Lucy contained Urza's magic. Luo Xingchen shook his head slightly. The magic that was sealed in the library came to mind. In Luo Xingchen's understanding, I am afraid that only that magic can do such a thing. He stood up, put his hands in his pockets, and walked towards the door. After all, in this era, it stands to reason that no one in this guild knows Lucy. Therefore, it is better to have less contact with her. What's more, Luo Xingchen will be more curious about the future Urza. The other side, the only river in Magnolia. Natsu and Gray in disguise and Happy appear here. However, the development of the situation is somewhat unexpected for Happy. Several people originally planned to come here to take a look. It's a look back on the past. But here they meet young Natsu and Gray who have escaped here. It's just that the two of them were in a clearing by the river. Happy, it all are on the slope above the clearing. And young Natsu and Gray don't know why. Hit it straight. The adult Natsu and Gray above were still watching with relish at first. But after discussing who wins in the end, the two people who disagreed with each other also fought directly. Happy looked down at the young Natsu and Gray fighting each other, looking at the grown-up Natsu and Gray who were fighting each other. With a deep sigh, sure enough, Natsu and Gray haven't changed a bit since they were kids. Fairy Tale is not far away. The utility room of the white tent. A girl in a white cat costume is squatting on the ground. He stared intently at the book in front of him. Her long scarlet hair was tied into a double ponytail, naturally scattered on both sides of the arm. The tail behind him kept wagging. Her name is Urza Scarlet, also Urza from the future. At this moment, she seemed to have encountered some problem, and her mouth made a murmur. The mouse never passed by, but after discovering the huge cat in front of him, and immediately fled. But Urza wasn't in the mood to care. His brows furrowed tightly, and his tail swayed faster and faster. This means wrong or... Urza raised his head sharply, his eyes full of despair. Complain aloud. No, I don't understand at all. Would you like to ask the stars of this era? She muttered to herself. The guy seems to know everything after all. 39. You can also ask Levy of this era. She is also very knowledgeable. No interference in this era. She quickly dismissed the idea. But what should we do? Urza's attention was all on the book in front of him, so that no one came from behind at all. Chapter 76, Conversation across time and space step by step. This is the crisp sound of the small leather shoes hitting the ground. The cat girl over there. 35, a slightly immature voice came from behind Urza. Urza was surprised. She was very familiar with this voice. He slowly turned his head and looked at the silver armor behind him. Girl with crimson hair. Urza's pupils shrank and his mouth opened wide. Yes, it's me. She cried out in horror in her heart. You're dressed so weird. The young Urza didn't seem to notice anything unusual. But after looking up and down, the adult Urza made its own evaluation. Then he asked in confusion, is this popular recently? Oh, future Urza replied in a trembling voice. Forget it. Young Urza didn't bother with this question. After a moment of silence, he asked aloud, excuse me, have you ever seen a pink-haired with a scarf and a black-haired without a top? 55, Natsu and Gray. Future Urza blurted out. Young Urza looked suspiciously at the strange man in front of him. How do you know their names? She asked. Oops. Future Urza responded, quickly using both hands and feet, crawled out of the tent, facing the empty street. While waving his hand, he said hurriedly, it's nothing. The two of them should be over there, because they're calling each other's names. So I remembered it. In desperation, the future Urza held back a lame reason, forced to explain. Young Urza felt nothing wrong. Nodding lightly, really sorry. As he spoke, he walked in the direction Urza said in the future. It's really useless for me to get angry just for ordering a cake. Young Urza walks and reflects on how much he seems to have gone too far today. The future Urza in the rear also stood up. His eyes looked at the self who was advancing in the sunset. He smiled slightly and said softly, "Go apologize." Young Urza's progress stopped. Unbelievably, turned his head and looked at the future Urza. "Say, what did you say?" "I will apologize." She pointed to herself. The tone was full of stubbornness. The breeze caressed past. Two people in different time and space. The same long crimson hair danced together at this moment. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the faces of the two people. One is laughing, the other is angry. "I know, you'll apologize." Future Urza seemed to be saying to himself. No, she was talking about herself. It is because she knows herself enough that she knows. The two just stared at it. Halfway through, the young Urza puffed out her mouth and flushed her cheeks. She turned around stubbornly and closed her eyes. Pretending to be indifferent, he strode away. "They won't apologize. It's their fault for stealing the cake." Her voice was loud, as if trying to cover up her lack of confidence. Future Urza is not saying anything. In this way, he quietly watched the back of his young self leaving, until it disappears. He raised his head slightly and looked at the orange sky, as red as his face when he was young. "It's so stupid. Don't you even have the courage to admit yourself?" She seemed to be questioning herself. Self-deprecating smile. "Looks like I'm really a hopeless guy. Does anyone really scold themselves like this?" A familiar voice came from behind future Urza. "Found again." She was taken aback. He quickly turned his head to look behind. On the pile of boxes, a young man was sitting lazily above. He leaned on his knees with one hand and looked directly at himself. "Stars!" Urza exclaimed, but he immediately covered his mouth. What are you talking about? I don't understand. I don't understand." After hesitatingly said this sentence, she turned around quickly and was about to leave. I said, after finally meeting someone from the future, "Did you just leave?" Luo Xingchen got up and jumped down. Came behind Urza. Hearing the shout, Urza also stopped. Now, she understood that she had been completely exposed. Turning around, she looked at Luo Xingchen and sighed in frustration. "Xingchen, how did you find out?" Luo Xingchen crossed his arms and walked up. After looking up and down, he said, "Although your decoration is novel, it does not serve as a cover for identity. 35, and most importantly, I'm not as crazy as you are, Urza." 35, Urza blushed in a rare blush. However, it's really amazing to see people from the future. 35, Luo Xingchen sighed with emotion. Urza smiled helplessly. "Yeah, it's really amazing to be able to talk to the old you." After a pause, she continued. "It's like God's arrangement. Obviously, he has been vigilant against himself and cannot contact you in the past. But, after all, I can't help it. You become a lot more cheerful, Urza." Luo Xingchen said softly. Haven't I always been like this?" Urza looked at Luo Xingchen, who was a little shorter than himself at the moment, suspiciously. But Luo Xingchen shook his head. Leaning back against the wall, he stared straight at the gradually setting sun ahead and said, "It's different. The armor that binds your heart has been removed by you. 35, it's easy to live like this." Urza was stunned for a moment, then smiled dumbly. He and Luo Xingchen leaned against the wall and said, "It's really very easy." Looking at the cheeks of Luo Xingchen, who is still young at the moment, as if recalling something, he smiled and said, "The moment I unloaded it, I seemed to be embraced by the whole world." Urza's smile is pure at the moment. There is no more sadness hidden in my heart. Some are just aspirations for the future. Then I can rest assured. Luo Xingchen nodded lightly. "You've matured this way since you were a kid," Urza said. "Mature? Maybe." Luo Xingchen didn't look back, still watching the sunset. Urza didn't speak either, just stayed by Luo Xingchen's side. Watching the sunset, just like that night, the two lay on the beach together, staring at the stars. As the sun went down, Luo Xingchen was also ready to leave here. "By the way, I came here to tell you about this magic." Saying that, Luo Xingchen pointed to the book in Urza's hand. The title of the book is Memories of Time, and when you open the book, You will be sent to the time and space where you first remembered. But 35 Luo Xingchen's expression became serious. This magic can only transport me to the era of memories. I don't know why you were affected, but the magic will expire in 6 hours. 99. And at that time, only the owner of the memory will be sent back. So you must gather together before the time comes and use the method to come back. What? Urza exclaimed B. Chapter 77 The Bunny, the little girl, and the stars watching Urza's back hurriedly leaving. Luo Xingchen twitched the corners of his mouth. After just knowing the magical nature of recalling time, Urza suddenly remembered that at that time, I waited for others because when I was tidying up the library, all fell together because of some accident. And it just so happened that Natsu accidentally opened the book of Memories of Time and Space. Therefore, several people are involved in the time in Natsu's memory. So came here. In other words, if they want to go back, it must be when the transmission is turned on, touching Natsu's body again. This can be passed back to their era together. But the bottom line is that Natsu hasn't been found until now. Seeing that the time is getting closer, Urza couldn't sit still and immediately set off to find Natsu by himself. And because I believe that Luo Xingchen will not do anything to change the past, so I briefly described Lucy's appearance. Please Luo Xingchen to help find 650 Lucy. With that said, he left here in a hurry, helplessly shook his head. Luo Xingchen still walked towards the guild. Lucy should still be in the guild at the moment anyway. On the streets of Magnolia, Lucy, who just came out of the guild, looked frustrated. He ignored the surprised glances of passers-by. Lucy sighed deeply. Sorry, because everyone in the past is too fresh, I accidentally overplayed. Saying that, Lucy tugged at his hair in annoyance. It's so annoying, history won't change, will it? There won't be a big accident because of me in the future. For a long time, the frustrated Lucy put down his hands helplessly. Looking aside, Lucy froze again. By the way, where is this place? Unconsciously, I came to a strange place. Hooves, hoofs. There was a rush of hooves behind him, and the cry for help. Come here, help. The horse is frightened. Can anyone help me stop it? Hearing the sound behind, Lucy turned around in confusion. Immediately, he saw two crazy people dragging the carriage and quickly passing in front of him. The groom behind him is constantly chasing. But how could an ordinary groom catch up with a frightened horse ahead? Hoof, hoof. There are guests in the carriage. The groom stumbled and fell to the ground. He raised his head and gasped for help at the onlookers. What? Lucy immediately turned his head to look at the carriage galloping in front of him. Without thinking too much, Lucy immediately stepped forward and chased after the carriage. It seems that the red high-heeled shoes under his feet are too much in the way. Lucy opened her heels as she ran. He roared forward. Wait for me. However, in the future, Lucy's strength is indeed not weak. At least, in terms of physical fitness, the speed is not slow. Soon, Lucy approached the runaway carriage. Help me, I'm so scared, blonde little girl in a gorgeous pink dress inside the carriage. He seemed to sense the figure behind him desperately chasing after him. Immediately, a cry for help was heard. A kid. Lucy was startled. Immediately after that, he said, Don't be afraid. I'll come to save you right away. He looked at the handle on the back of the carriage. Lucy stretched out his hand straight but didn't reach it. It's still a little bit. Gritting his teeth, Lucy once again accelerated the speed that was already close to the limit. The palm sticks out again. Finally grabbed the rear handle of the carriage. But the next moment, the huge force of the carriages galloping forward was not something that Lucy could forcibly stop with his bare hands. So much so that her whole body was taken flying directly. Ah! The sudden screams, Luo Xingchen, who was about to return to the guild, stopped. Looking forward, two horses were dragging a carriage and a man hanging from the rear of the carriage, running like crazy. The scream just now was the terrified scream of the figure hanging from the back of the carriage. Blinking his eyes, Luo Xingchen saw the general appearance of the figure clearly. It's a blonde bunny girl. Isn't this Lucy? Luo Xingchen was stunned. Immediately it became clear what was going on. Watching the carriage turn into a corner, Luo Xingchen didn't hesitate and stomped on the ground. The whole person bounced up directly, landed on the building beside him, and then chased after him. After all, it is in the city. With many bends, it will be closer if you walk a straight distance from the top of the building. Outside Magnolia, Lucy felt like he was about to fall apart. If the willpower is not strong enough, I am afraid that his hand holding the handle at the rear of the carriage will also be forced to let go. Never give up. Lucy gritted his teeth, struggling to put the other hand on the handle, then began to exert force, and finally climbed up. Lucy, who was sitting at the back of the carriage, breathed a sigh of relief and touched the beads of sweat on his forehead. Little sister is waiting. It will be ready soon. After comforting the people in the carriage, Lucy climbed to the top of the carriage, intent to move to the driving position ahead. However, there was an abrupt chill that filled the surroundings, made Lucy shudder at the top of the wagon. This feeling, Lucy's eyes widened suddenly. The eyes looked forward. It was a figure jumping from the top of a tree on the side, standing right in front of the carriage at the moment. The already red-eyed horse doesn't care about the figure in front of him at all. He lowered his head and rushed forward frantically. "Stars, be careful," Lucy exclaimed, barely thinking. "Huh." He slowly let out a cold breath. Facing the rushing carriage, Luo Xingchen raised his arm. The cold air condensed white ice crystals on the tips of his fingers. The cold air suddenly erupted. Ice crystals gradually spread on the horse's body. The speed of the two galloping horses also began to slow down, getting slower and slower, until it stopped smoothly in front of Luo Xingchen. Two horses have been turned into ice sculptures. "Stop!" Lucy breathed a sigh of relief. He jumped off the roof of the car and asked the people in the carriage, "Are you not injured?" 99. "It's okay, big sister and that brother." A soft voice came from inside the carriage. "Don't worry, it's fine," Lucy responded. Then he looked at Luo Xingchen, who was standing in front of him. Lucy suddenly didn't know what to say. After all, just now in a hurry, he actually called out the other party's name. Now, even she doesn't know how to get around. Seeming to see Lucy's thoughts, Luo Xingchen said, "No need to explain, I know." "Huh." Lucy 1.1 was taken aback. "I'll take you to Urza." "Time is running out," Luo Xingchen said. Suddenly, Lucy thought of his mission. Frightened, he hurriedly said, "Oops. Thank you anyway, Xingchen." Then he opened his mouth to the little girl in the carriage and said, "I have something to do, so I'll go first." Saying that, Lucy followed Luo Xingchen's footsteps.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.